This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything. Brought to you by First Light. When I'm hunting, I need gear that won't quit. First Light builds no compromise gear that keeps me in the field longer. No shortcuts, just gear that works. Check it out at firstlight.com. That's FIRSTLITE.com. All right, welcome to the MeatEater podcast. Today we're going to dig into something of great importance that we touched on a bunch of times in the past is what in the world happened to and what is going on with the Columbia River and the salmon runs. I mean, this is a story that's played out over centuries. Historically, the Columbia, I pulled this from your guys' website, the guests I'm going to introduce in a minute. I had always read that historically the Columbia had annual runs of 10 to 12 million salmon. I was reading today, it could have been some years as high as 16 million salmon ran the Columbia. Our good old buddies Lewis and Clark, who come up every time you're trying to describe something from the old-timey days, describe salmon in the Columbia as being inconceivable, the numbers. They had fish, salmon species running from March to October, steelhead in there all winter, and then, as we'll get into, just a never-ending series of mistakes, intentional actions, accidental actions have led it to be where it is just small fractions of those numbers running up and down the river. And we're going to talk with a couple guests today who have been involved in salmon recovery on the Columbia River from a intertribal perspective. So the Columbia River flowed through, can you guys, I'm leading up to my intro here of you guys, but can you remind me how many miles of river are in the Columbia Basin? I think it was, I was reading about it today, but I can't remember the number.
Well, the Columbia River itself, like where it's coming from Canada, is about 750 miles from the ocean, but half of the Columbia is north of Canada.
Yeah.
And then you've got all of the major tribs, you know, from the Yakima, the Wenatchee, the Snake, the Willamette, you know, just all up and down the river. So you're looking at, even now in the high water years, 500,000 CFS have flowed down by Bonneville Dam.
Yeah, so 500,000 cubic feet per second.
Yep.
Of water flowing through there. And the folks we're going to talk to today about tribal efforts to recover fish. The tribes acknowledging that the states just aren't doing it at the speed they would like and with the vision that they would like them to have. The feds aren't doing it at the speed they would like, and they're not pursuing the vision they would like them to pursue. So increasingly, the tribes, Native American tribes, have been getting involved in this. And we're going to speak today with Doug Hatch, who's the deputy manager of the Fisheries Science Department of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, and also Donella Miller is the Fishery Science Manager. And real quick before we dig in too much, can you tell people what tribes are in the intertribal organization?
Yeah, we're a consortia. We're a technical arm of course, the Yakima Nation, which I'm a tribal member of, and also the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, which my grandmother was from. So I'm also part Umatilla as well, but also the Warm Springs Tribe in Oregon and the Nez Perce in Idaho.
Okay.
So yeah, we work with those four tribes on Columbia Basin issues, and all four, treaty tribes. We signed treaties with the government in 1855 to retain our, hunting, fishing, and gathering rights throughout our usual and accustomed areas, and that's really key because we ceded land to the government in exchange for the set boundaries of the reservation, and also to hunt, fish, and gather in perpetuity throughout our our natural areas.
Yeah.
So
And then that right is infringed on by the fact that then the people you signed the treaty with went ahead and destroyed the fishery.
yeah, and that's really key. The work that we do is, those rights mean nothing if there's no fish to catch. The right isn't just to dip our nets in empty waters; it's to actual catch fish. And there's language in the treaty that talks about our ability to maintain a modest living, and people can't support themselves on it anymore. Our people, unfortunately, live in poverty up and down the Columbia River at treaty access sites that aren't meant to be lived in. It's more or less boat ramps, and they don't have water, power, or just a bathroom. But it's definitely not what we signed up for.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna tell that story first. I want to do. What day? When did the thing drop that we made in Texas? When is? Because I explained this all big time in Texas.
It already dropped, but we're trying to hit it multiple times up until the launch.
Just being cognizant of the fact that. So we recorded a show down in Texas. Talked about taint and meat, skunks, nuts on a cat. In that, we explained that if you subscribe to the show, you're going to see, if you subscribe to the podcast, you're going to see some changes coming up in March 9. So starting, is it March 9? That's what this is going to happen?
The week of, yep.
Yeah, starting in March 9, you're going to start seeing, every week you're going to see 2 MeatEater podcast drops. The regular Monday thing that you subscribe to now stays the same, and that's like the interview show. So that would be like what we're doing right here, right now. We're sitting around with tribal fisheries managers having an interview with them about their area of expertise. That's like the interview portion of the show, and that will always drop at the same time. In addition to that, there's going to be a weekly news show, news and commentary drop. As I explained, it's like Spencer's concept. We cover our news, your news, and the news on the news show. Okay, 3 kinds of news. That will drop sometime during the week. It'll vary to when it comes out. The folks you know and love, and the kind of material you know and love from Radio Live, that stuff will move on to this news show. Radio Live won't be like a set. There won't be a live thing anymore, and it won't occur at a set time anymore. It'll be the news and commentary show, which comes out when it comes out. Stay tuned for all that. There'll be some new artwork. You'll know what happened because there'll be new artwork. That'll be the best way you'll know that it happened. You'll be like, oh, new artwork. Must mean this thing happened.
And please subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps a lot.
You know what word I learned today from you guys' website? I'm going to do a trivia test. Don't. You guys know this, but don't tell anybody. I'm going to trivia test these guys. So I was on the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission site today. What is the word? I'm like Spencer here. What is the word for a fish that spawns once and dies? It's in the same vein of like anadromous, catadromous. It's like that flavor of a word. But it's mean you spawn once and die.
I've heard
Is
this
it
before.
diadromous?
Like a scientific name?
Diadromous.
Or a fun name?
Yeah. No.
Like die. Ha ha
The
ha,
word
Brody.
no.
Was that a joke? No. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you being clever? Like die?
No.
Oh, I thought he was being
I thought he was being clever too. At first I didn't think he was being clever, then I thought he's being clever.
No.
It's that flavor. What is that, Latin? I don't know. Is it Latin? Diadromous, catadromous?
I don't know. I should look that up.
Monodromous.
No.
I know I've heard it before, but I don't
Dude,
remember.
I have never encountered the word. I didn't know there was a word.
Go
I've
ahead
never
and tell
encountered it. You ready? None of you guys got it. I never even heard the damn word.
Catadromous comes from Greek roots.
Oh, it's Greek. This is probably Greek. Semmelparis.
So it's not like those words really at all.
How do you spell that?
When I say same flavor, I mean like a foreign language sounding deal, you know? I guarantee it's Greek. Semmelparis. I never heard that word.
Is it
in my note? You know, you got like a notes function on your phone. I keep words that I need to incorporate into my vocabulary on a little list. Like
But those are only the fish that die after they spawn.
That
So
means you
not
spawn once and
steelhead,
die.
not
Not
Atlantic
steelhead,
salmon.
not ocean run cut.
Semel Paris. I should know this because I took Latin. It does have
It is
Latin
Latin.
roots. It combines semel, meaning once or a single time, and pario, meaning to give birth or produce.
Another thing I learned, we're going to go way back deep before we get to this. Another thing I learned on your site that kind of blew my mind is those dams, the dams on the Columbia system, did a way to think about it when baby salmon, when smolts are coming back down the river, it's basically you lose 7 to 15% of them die at each dam.
Wow.
Just an incredible way to think about it.
Yeah.
Can you?
And how many are there? How many dams
I
are
have
there?
no idea.
Well, there's 4.
Stay up close to your mic.
Oh, there's 4 on the lower part of the main stem, Columbia, and then you have the 4 in the lower Snake River, and then there's also privately owned dams that are owned by the Mid-Columbia Public Utility Districts. So there's four right in the mid-sea. So there's 8 on the main stem Columbia before you get to Roosevelt, right? Or Grand Coulee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chief Joseph is
Oh,
impassable, and then Grand Coulee is upstream of that. But yeah, if you're going to the headwaters of the Columbia, which would be the Methow River, if you're up there, you're going to go over 9 dams on the main stem. More if you go on up the tributaries. If you go up the Snake, you're going over 8 dams before you ever get to the Salmon River or the Imnaha or any of those big rivers in the Snake.
8 times 15, that's a big number.
It's big.
I mean, then we can do the math.
more than 100.
Let's say, yeah.
Yeah,
the
therein,
math by
therein is the
percentage.
deal.
And then there's mortality coming upstream too. Not just every adult. Just because there's a fish ladder, you got to find that fish ladder and you got to negotiate it. You got to get over it. You got to avoid the predators. You've got lots of stuff.
Can you guys lay out a little bit like what did the system look like before the first major impact? Before the first major negative impact came to it, which I guess was the fish canneries. Like just try to help people visualize. So, like nowadays people think about salmon runs and it's like Alaska, right? When they think about salmon runs, it's Bristol Bay, right? This was a bigger salmon run than those. The biggest salmon run in the country, the biggest salmon run in the world was the Columbia.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have been that you wouldn't go to Alaska to see big salmon runs. The Columbia was the big salmon run. Like, what did that look like? Like, what fish were there? To what quantity? Is it even possible? No one scientifically measured it, but like, what did it look like?
It was, that's why Celilo Falls, right? That's historically, that was the major trading hub of the Pacific Northwest. That people came from, the Midwest to trade buffalo and the ocean area to trade salt for salmon. It was even obsidian and tool making and things like that. It was inconceivable. And that's why the overexploitation happened because, like you said, you read the old timey descriptions and they thought it was an inexhaustible resource, that there was so much that people were able to gather what they needed. And that's what sustained life in our region for millennia. And it was just, the trading and the tribal people living amongst the land is, intrinsically is a part of nature. And, it's just it was a completely different way of thinking of, exploitation and things like that. But that, I don't know, that's why it seemed so, that thought process was different from the way that we lived as, taking and being a part of this system versus coming in, like how you said, the first major negative impact would have been the fish wheels and and even the seining and things like that. And so those types of things happened. And, when you look at everything is always viewed as a resource and how can that benefit man? And, you hear about the salmon, but even further down the road, the salmon kind of became a problem to development of the Columbia River system when they were looking at the placement of the hydro system, because then they would have to incorporate fish ladders and deal with the salmon. It would have been easier if they did away with all these natural runs, and we could retain salmon, but you retain it in the lower river below the dams, so they didn't have to do all these extra steps to maintain the stocks. That's why you see a lot of those hatcheries are below Bonneville Dam, and it's unnatural. Spring chinook and coho and things like that, and those hatcheries still operate, but the tribes have been working to try to restore and bring them back into their natal areas throughout. And even to me, I think those numbers that you read are actually kind of low.
The 10 to 16 million estimates.
Because even today you could get, there's been a lot of work in the Okanagan Basin and Lake Okanagan in Canada where we've seen sockeye returns up to 800,000 adult sockeye returning past Bonneville. And just to think, that's just one lake, and there's all these other blocked areas in the tributaries. And if today we could get back almost 1 million of just one stock, and a lot of that work was done. It was exhaustive estimate, and they looked at a lot of the cannery records and what they were able to process. But I think there was more waste than there were fish actual processed. You see those old pictures where, you have salmon 4 feet deep and they're just working those cannery lines. Well, when that obviously went bad, every day they'd just shove it out and bring in more. So there was...
Because you never run out.
Yeah. That's the way it was viewed. And just kind of going back to what we were talking about, the 15% at every project, that's only the impact of what that dam itself causes, like fish going through the turbines or, in the spillway, they get disoriented and things like that. But that's not adding in all of the other factors that those dams create, the reservoirs and the slack water and the water quality and the predation and all those types of things. So the impacts are huge. And you're right, you add it up, there shouldn't be any more fish left. It's just amazing that we still have fish coming back.
Yeah, I should clarify on that percentage. I was making a joke about 15 times 8, but the estimate is 7 to 15%. So it's not all, 15% is the high end of what the estimated loss is.
Just direct dam mortality, but that doesn't take into account the slack water it creates, the habitat that creates for piscivorous predators to eat the fish. They get disoriented when they go through the dam. Birds pick them off. So all of that predation part isn't part of that dam mortality. That's just the direct mortality from the dam. And kind of quickly, I guess, historically by the numbers, it was right now you've got a spring chinook run, right? That's like 80 to 150,000 fish. And then it drops way off for the summers down to 10 or 20,000. And then in the fall, that's the big run now. And it's going to run a couple 100,000 fish, in our really good years, 500,000 or something.
Okay.
And historically, it was a big curve. It was a big mountain. That summer chinook run that's so low, that was the peak.
Oh.
So all of these impacts have split it into these 3 different groups of chinook. And so you've got the fall chinook, which is the biggest now, but historically that was the tail. It was those summer runs.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
that's what they were going after. The early canneries and stuff was the most abundant, group. And so they made those big impacts on that. And that was the June hogs. That included all of the really big fish that went up, into the lower Snake River, up in the upper Columbia. The fish that were 130, 140 pounds.
Oh, man.
Jeez. That's a big fish.
Dude, it's like you can't...
Yeah, we catch those like 8-10 pounders in southeast.
Like, they gotta be 28. Where we fish, they gotta be 28 inches. You're always like, sweet, he's 28 inches. And like you go into the bars, you go into old bars, and you always see these kings, from whatever half century ago. And you're like, dude, are they there anymore? These 100+ pound fish, but just like there's not. And just fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer.
Fewer and fewer. We do sampling at Bonneville Dam, so we sample all of the fish runs coming through Bonneville, and we'll get a text from the techs that are sampling. It's like, here's a really big one, and a big one now is 60, 70 pounder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are pretty rare, and it used to not be. a mere 35 years ago when I started, we'd get a lot more of those than we do now. So definitely the size of maturity or the size of the adult fish has gone down.
Yeah. The largest I've caught was 63 pounds, and that seemed like a monster.
Well, that is a
Oh,
monster.
Yeah.
How did you catch
Yeah.
that?
Gill netting.
Gill netting?
Yeah, in our fall fishery.
Okay.
But I really had a aha moment back when, so I think I was 18 as a technician working in the Methow River. We're doing spring chinook spawning ground surveys, and it was getting later in the season, and so there was this portion of the main stem that would float on the Methow River, and it runs into a wall. There's a big pool, and we floated our raft down, and it was just, there was a group of probably about 30 big June hogs, summer chinook. They were huge. Of course, you get the magnification of the water, but they were still huge, and we just floated around in there and watched them. They were just holding up, waiting to head up to spawn. But it's just so amazing to see those things. And you were talking about how many miles inland. Also, when I worked up in the Methow, I think I looked at it. I looked on the map to see it was like 840 miles or.
Well, they had
something
come that far.
In this little bitty tributary to the Methow where we were doing a spawning ground survey, and I was like, just like, because we had to hike in and then walk down the creek. Is like, how did this fish even make it back here? It's amazing. And then we were walking down another section, and there's portions that get dewatered in the fall, and we found a couple of spring chinook in this pocket by this boulder. And so my coworker, he takes off one side of his hip waiter, and then we fill it with water and put that fish in there, and we just ran it like a couple
he was
hundred
stranded.
yards. He was stranded, yeah.
Because pulling out because irrigation draw.
Oh, you
Mhm.
rescued.
Yeah. So we ran it back so he could reconnect with the river. It's like, you can't make it this far and not live. You gotta.
Oh man, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So the things you run into being out there, it's just that's what really helps people's connection to understand, and just thinking and realizing how much they've gone through to get back.
Yeah. Can you a little bit explain the process, or I guess just the evolved thinking that led to the creation of a tribal organization that would get involved in fisheries management? I know, like, in some notes Corinne had from pre-interviews, she talked about that there was a growing frustration that the states and the feds weren't moving this the way you wanted to move, and that the goal was set in a way that the tribes weren't comfortable with the goal. Like, basically the goal being, let's save the fish from genetic extinction.
Yeah.
And that doesn't satisfy native peoples on the river.
No, unfortunately, a lot of the fish are managed on ESA levels, right? That's holding things on the brink of extinction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the issues with the ESA itself. Well, for one, it's not proactive. And two, they have protections when things get really bad to save them from extinction, but there's nothing in the act that's binding. It's recommendations towards recovery. There's no requirements to recover a species. So it's just the minimal amount possible that you could do to keep this species from going extinct. And that's not acceptable, as a society, not just with tribes, of allowing species to go extinct. Or, we don't want museum relics that in the river that we look at. We want to be able to enjoy the bounty and continue our way of life. And, kind of getting what we signed up for in the treaties. And that's where the really, sustainable, healthy and sustainable populations that we're able to harvest. Because, we've talked about treaty rights and our ability to harvest, but that's a shared right that we have with the public, right? The treaties, there's been two big court cases that kind of led to the formation of our organization, and really the formation of the tribes taking a leading role. First was U.S. v. Oregon, and that was really the tribes being established as a co-manager of the resource. So because it was a treaty right, so it's our, we have the obligation to ensure that it persists for future generations. And then several years later, we had U.S. v. Washington that made the determination that the tribes were entitled to 50% of the harvestable run, not just 50% of the total, the 50% of the harvestable run. And so we have the, that unfortunately, I've heard others, what I've learned is, unfortunately, we operate in gavel to gavel fish management. Because you talk about gravel to gravel, like, right, you're inclusive of the entire life cycle. But unfortunately, we work in gavel to gavel because it's
just court ruling to court ruling.
Yeah. And that's, I saw that you have a show out that talks about the recent litigation on the hydro operations on the Snake River Dam. And that's kind of been pulled in, really kind of, unfortunately, became just a breach campaign. But to us, it's a lot more than that, because with our culture, everything, the importance, everything has a purpose, a place and a purpose. And so we really have that holistic management aspect. And, we don't really have the silos that a lot of the state and federal agencies work under. That's why, we have people that want to work for tribes, that really care about, the resource and things like that, because everything that we do is so broad. And, like, I'm wearing the sturgeon hat, and, like, all species are important to us, not just the salmon, but sturgeon, lamprey, even, trout and bridge lip suckers and all of those things that are a part of nature. But, we hold all of those things sacred as our first foods. And so that's the way what we bring to the table in our management aspect, because, we're not about ESA level. We don't want museum relics. We want healthy and sustainable. And we would love more than to have work ourselves out of a job. That's what I've heard one of my other bosses say. But just, the tools that we have to work with along the way, like, hatchery production. I know there's a lot of issues between hatchery versus wild. And the tribes do a lot of supplementation, hatchery production, but we try to bring in non-conventional methods. It's not just fish factories pumping out numbers. We're, using, we have a genetics lab, a state-of-the-art genetics lab that we have in cooperation with the University of Idaho, that's located in southern Idaho in Hagerman. So we're kind of leading the way on the genetic side. And then also the way we implement our hatcheries is not just releasing them all directly from the hatchery, but taking them out to acclimation sites so they could return to areas that have suitable spawning habitat and things like that. And as Doug mentioned, we do all of the monitoring at Bonneville Dam of all the stocks that are coming through. So we're able to take that information, and which also aids in harvest management. And just our work is so broad and diverse. We have ocean, estuary program that we've acquired about 5 years ago now. So we're really looking, like I said, gravel to gravel, and bringing in all aspects. And, the tribes have, I'd say we're a lot less risk averse, I think, because we take that approach to be careful to do things. It's like, we don't want to study things to death. Things get wrapped up in 10 plus year studies before you could actually even do anything. It's like, and, myself being the fish science manager, that was kind of, I kind of thought twice about taking this job. It's like, I don't want to be just a research scientist, but the approach that the tribes have been taking is like applied research. You're taking actionable measures and measuring the success of those actions. And, you use what's working and advance that. And I think that's the biggest thing. And, we've really grown a lot. Like I mentioned, those 2 court cases, US v. Washington, US v. Oregon, where, the tribes sued the states over harvest and, co-management and things like that. But we've came a long ways in even just recently during that litigation on the Snake River, the hydro operations litigation, and formed the 6 sovereigns. That's with our 4 tribes in the states of Washington and Oregon, and come together. And that's how we entered into a stay in litigation. It was meant to be a 10-year stay with a set of commitments. over the first 5 years. Then there was a check-in, and then it could have rolled over to another 5 years. And we were just getting started rolling in that, and it was bringing commitments to the basin, and also giving us a voice to look for appropriations. It's not like we weren't trying to upend energy prices or anything like that. It's just like, okay, can you pay the true cost of the cheap electricity that you're benefiting from? And it's not really grandma's electricity or the common person. It's corporate, right? It's industrial customers that have really the huge benefit of our cheap power in the region. And that's why, like, we're talking about fish in the Columbia Basin, but really it's a global thing, right? Because of all of the industry that our region attracts because of the cheap power. Like back in the 80s and whatnot, we had all of the big aluminum smelters where we have none of the natural resources to make aluminum, but they were all there because it was so cheap to process because of that cheap power. And then now we're seeing the new onslaught of that is data centers. We have data centers a lot.
Wanting that electricity.
Yeah, and water. That's the bad thing is like there's always extraction, and then we're already like operating in a deficit, but yet we're planning for a future that we don't even have the resources for. And that's why the tribes really bring that to the table of like who's looking out for the resource and what's best for the environment. And that's why we talk about salmon being a keystone species, because it's good for everyone. What's good for the salmon is good for the environment and for the people, and us looking out for that in that holistic manner.
I got 3 observations I want to hit you with. One is, you don't need to take this on, but like people like to look at sort of singular things that had global impacts. And there's this argument that the reason we won World War II is because the dams on the Columbia system, because we could produce aircraft. Mm-hmm. We had enough power to smelt enough aluminum, and we out aircraft the Germans. And so, whether that's true or not, it always like sticks in my head, like thinking about what a mistake those dams were. And I think about that question, and it always like it's just a complication in there. We had on second observations. We had on RFK Jr. when he was running for president, and he went and took over Health and Human Services under the Trump administration. But when he was talking about his career in environmental litigation, and he said when you look at these big corporations, and they think that there are these like free enterprise organizations, he says they never ever pay the cost. They don't acknowledge they don't pay the cost. But in producing that electricity or producing those metals, they never had to account to the American people of what they took from you to make those things. Like no one's ever billed them for the cost of an annual run of 12 million salmon. No one's paid that. He's like, they don't admit it, but they're subsidized. They're subsidized by what they take from everybody in terms of fish or in terms of anything, clean water. Like, has anyone ever billed them for, do you know what I mean? Has anyone billed them for what their clean water should be worth? They'll never pay that shit.
Yeah. We have mitigation goals of the impacts of the hydro system that have never been met 50, 60 years. And they've never met them by millions. I think we're barely even at half of what we should have been getting 60 years ago. Imagine how much that would add up to what the tab is. The way that gets wiped clean is they're working toward interim goals. 50 years later, we're still just working towards interim goals. And even today, the interim goals that we're working towards restoration, that we actually have the teeth to push on, is 5 to 8 million. And that was determined by the Northwest Power and Planning Council. Of that is the direct impacts of this hydro system is the 5 to 8 million. And then that's when the other losses are due to like irrigation and the tributaries and other types of urbanization and things like that. So we'll never fully get back what we had, but I know we could do better, because and a lot of that too is just people's resistance to change, and that's the way we've always done things, and the status quo continues, and until they, and I don't know, it's hard. And like you said, you will never get back. We don't pay the truth cost for power, and a lot of this stuff is for export, foreign companies that come in and exploit our resources. And you still have communities that they were promised jobs, but that's only during the construction, and what's ongoing is minimal. Like even with Google and the city of the Dalles, they came in and updated their waste treatment plant, but then they built a data center and then 2 more data centers, and now they're overwhelming that infrastructure that they promised, and they were taking groundwater. And so they have communities just south of town that are coming up with dry wells and things like that.
Yeah.
And now they want to buy land in the national forest to be able to create a reservoir to extract more
Sure.
water.
And then like Sam Altman and Elon Musk, he'll emerge as the world's first trillionaire, and there will never be a reckoning. There will never be a reckoning for the cost of what they did.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah, it was funny. We applied for a grant from Google because they want to be green by 2030 or something. And then we have a Delta project where the Klickitat River comes into the Columbia that needs some major work. It's never had any maintenance. Like you could practically walk halfway across the Columbia because that sandbar is so big, because you don't have the freshets that flush it out. And that's one of our big issues that we're working on. It's predation hotspots and warm water and things like that. But we applied for that Google grant. It's just downstream, just across the river. We didn't even make it past the pre-proposal phase. And when we asked why wouldn't this qualify, it has good merit and everything, they gave us an AI response. It was just,
man.
it was just
kidding me.
generic.
Yeah. So you paid for your own response.
Yeah.
I want to get into one of the things that we want to talk about is what are things that can be done, and I want to get into that, like sea lions and all that. But there's a thing there's a third thing I wanted to bring up, and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but all these guys here can vouch for me on this. It's like, I was raised in the Great Lakes, okay, and I was raised to know that like the real villains in fisheries management, it's always the natives. Because people can't reconcile. They're like, how could it be that they're conducting commercial fishing? So they run, like in the Great Lakes, natives will run fish traps for whitefish, which white people don't. I mean, like generally speaking, white people don't fish whitefish. Generally, some do, but it's not like a top tier fish. Mm-hmm. People don't travel like to go there to fish whitefish. People want the non-native shit, or like largemouth native fish, all the salmon, introduced salmon. But you'll go and be like, the reason you didn't catch anything today is because of natives, right? And you'll hear it so much from guys in the Pacific Northwest, where they'll be like, you mentioned earlier having a gill net. They'll be like, that's the problem with the fishery. And it's like, but that's what you're raised to believe, that because it's always like a blame game. And you look at, but Bahamut, they fished here for 20,000, 10,000, 16, like thousands of years, supported the people on the fishery. Then European culture, like Euro-American culture, came in and destroyed the fishery. The things we did destroyed the fishery. But now you look and there's some native people catching some fish in a net, and that's who's to blame. It's pervasive. I don't even know if you realize how pervasive that thinking is. Because it's like it can't click. Like, how could they be commercial fishing when I can only keep one fish, or I can't keep any fish, but they can commercial fish? That's who killed all the fish. It's out there. Like that perspective is just out there.
Yeah, and I've lived it. Sure. Like growing up fishing on the Columbia, you do get a lot of hate. People come out and yell at you and things like that. We've been shot at night in the dark. We were out, and I called the cops. The cops didn't even show up. You could see the muzzle flash. It sounded like a 22, and we were like, "What the heck?" Good thing we were a ways from shore in that kind of like a bay area. And the 911 operator, well, can you see what they're wearing? And I'm like, no, it's dark. I see a muzzle flash. And well, can you let us know? And it's like we got down and had to drive out of there. And another time I always remember there was a older gentleman. He followed us because we're tied off of the bank. It was 2.5 hours. He stood on the shore and yelled and cussed at us. Like, I called the cops. Like, I think he might need to. I don't want this guy to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
That's how worked up he was, and like chucking rocks at us and things like that.
Because people can't picture the long history. They
Yeah.
they look through the dam. They look through the dam or past the dam, and they see you,
Yeah.
and that's the problem. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're like they
Yeah.
can't picture what happened.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I guess we're so visible, right? There's plenty of non-native gillnet fisheries that are happening in the lower river and a lot in the ocean, but it's just we're visible, and that's
Like if
yeah.
it wasn't for that little handful of fish, everything would be better. It's like, no, dude, it wouldn't be better. You're not talking about the problem. You don't want to talk about the real problem.
Yeah.
People don't want to talk about the real problem.
Yeah, the glass half full thing is I think it's awesome that people are starting to realize like, the work that we do, it benefits everybody, not just the tribes, it's everybody. And so like I've been at places like a trade show or whatever, and then somebody will come up, look at my tag, like, I want to shake your hand. They're part of they're a fishing guide or something like that, and they'll say, we wouldn't have salmon if it weren't for the Indians. And
So people do see that connection.
yeah, a little bit of that. So they're we're starting to realize it. And just the outreach and the partnerships that we have, and that the benefits that we bring is for all and not just us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we have commissioners that had spent time in federal prison for fishing, exercising their treaty reserved right to fish, and they were arrested, sentenced, spent time in prison for fishing. So it's a crazy deal. I'm from Idaho. I saw the same thing you're talking about, Steve, with the salmon, what happened in the salmon fisheries in the Columbia. But, that led to those court decisions. And then that formed, out of that, the tribal co-management, that formed the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission in 1977. And so the tribe started building staff from then. And now we're like at 150 to 170 people at CRITFC in Portland. Each of the 4 member tribes, the Yakima, Warm Springs, Umatilla, and Nez Perce, combined, we have like 750 people working on fish recovery. And I think that's where the tribes get their power, is that they're co-managers, and they get a singular focus on, it's the Fish Commission, right? It's not the Fish and Irrigation Commission. We don't have the things that the states are, they've got to look after all these other interests, and this is singularly focused on fish recovery. So what we want to do will provide more fish to our constituents, the tribal fishermen that are out there exercising their treaty right, and they're entitled to half of that harvestable fish.
Yeah.
And however they take them, they decide how they're going to take them. States decide how much they're going to split their 50% into sport fishing versus commercial fishing, however they want to divide it. And the tribes don't, they're party to that, but they don't tell the states how they're going to allocate their fisheries. And, it kind of should go the same way for the tribes. This is a big conservation effort, and they run hatcheries, about 10 hatcheries that are run by the tribes to get the money for it, and they don't catch all those fish. I mean, those fish are going out to the public.
Yeah.
Everybody's catching them from here to the Gulf of Alaska.
Yeah.
And we're kind of the end users on some of that. There's some stocks of fish like the klickitat. The majority of those are caught in Alaska and by the other ocean fisheries along the West Coast. And we have a pie chart, and then it shows all of the take, and the tribal harvest is just this little bitty sliver.
But that's the people putting them in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And doing all the work to the habitat restoration, because the work that we do goes beyond just fish. And that's what, like being in management now, of like getting people to understand like the things that we do, like, energy production is fish issues because of the hydro system, and habitat restoration, and even roads. Like we have our habitat staff that they've worked with the DOT to like move a highway, and putting in better fish passage, and just reconnecting rivers, which helps floods and flood management, flood risk, and then also, especially in the face of climate change and how things are changing. Like you were just talking about the weather here.
Mhm.
We're seeing that we're, potentially in our 3 years of drought, and this year isn't looking much better. And so we definitely have our work cut out for us, and it goes a long ways. And like Doug was saying about how the tribes choose to allocate. The other thing that our jobs are so great to me, and why it means so much, is on the cultural side. How much that these things are natural resources. And salmon, we refer to ourselves as salmon people, and it's cultural preservation. And that's really what, because I grew up in a traditional home with, like my mother and my grandparents, and practicing our, hunting, fishing, gathering, and, our tribal religion, and all of the things that go along with that. All of our ceremonies are centered around our natural resources, around the salmon, and things like that. And, sadly, we're losing that. And then that's how, people get led astray. You have, the effects of drugs and alcohol and stuff. But if we really had those things that for us to be able to continue, I think would be better off. And well, I know we would, because, living in those communities, and it's like we're lost. We're still lost because we were displaced by the construction of the dams on the river. We weren't relocated or subsidized or anything. It's just they came and spray painted on the houses, like at Celilo Falls, took an inventory, and that was it. We've never received our Columbia River housing in, for the villages that were flooded. It's just like your house is gone. You have
They
to
painted the ones that were going to be underwater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just took an inventory, and then people had no choice but to move to the reservation.
Or drown.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, even me realizing that now, like, I was born on the reservation in Toppenish, and I lived at my grandparents' house, but I was, even as an adult a couple of years ago, I realized, like, that wasn't my grandpa's home. My grandpa was born and raised at Celilo, and he went to the war. It's so funny, like, my grandpa's older sister, she used to tell us this story, and even as an older lady, she would cry about it. It still gets to me. She was born with cataracts, so she was legally blind, and so she couldn't help do all the work. So she took care of my grandpa. And she said one day at Celilo, the government, the military, police, everything, they just pulled in with cattle trucks, and they took the children by force and took them to a boarding school. And she said people were beaten, arrested, and she said that she held on to him and was dragged across the ground crying, "No, don't take him, it's just a baby." And she cried as an adult, that she said, if I could have just held on a little longer, maybe they would have gave up.
Mm-hmm.
But
And then he went on to fight in the war?
yeah, he was 4 years old, taken to the boarding school in Warm Springs, Oregon. He didn't get to come home for 2 years. And that was only because they were moving them to the boarding school at Fort Simcoe, which is on the Yakima Reservation.
Uh-huh.
And then he was there through like elementary school, and then he got shipped to Chemawa, which is in Oregon. That's a high school, boarding school, high school. He graduated from there when he was 17, and then he enlisted in the Navy and fought in World War II.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
And his home now sits underwater.
That's the home that he came back to from the war.
Uh.
Yeah.
You know, when I was talking about the conflict between like white dudes that fish and the perspective that native peoples are taking fish, it's like everybody's fighting over crumbs. In some regions, everybody's fighting over crumbs.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even know what happened. Like if it's breadcrumbs, they don't know what happened to the loaf of bread. There's, you know what I mean? It's just gone, and now they're just going to like fight for crumbs. And one of the ways that like fighting for crumbs, and it's I guess it's important because once those crumbs are gone, everything's gone. You know, to think of it like in terms of fish, right? If we lose the fish, if you lose all the memory of the fish and all the runs and all the historic areas, it's less that you can build up someday when you get it back together. But what turned me on to even wanting to talk to you guys is this idea, and Heather, my friend Heather Duville sent me some links about it, was like the sea lion issue. And I want to talk about that for a minute, or have you guys explain the sea lion issue for a minute, just to sort of demonstrate this idea of that to fix the problem is like impossible or seemingly impossible. Dam removal is so hard. And so you got to look like, well, that's what would like, there's these huge things that would occur and you could slowly rebuild the whole thing. But in the meantime, you got to like fight for crumbs. And it's even gotten to what we're fighting for crumbs with sea lions. Can you talk about that issue a bit? Like how sea lions play into this thing?
Yeah, sure. So, sea lions were heavily managed in the late 1800s, and then from like 1915 or so to 1970 into Colombia, there's a bounty on sea lions.
A bounty
and a sea lion hunter. So the Oregon Fish Commission hired a guy that would shoot sea lions and cut their ears off, and then get paid by how many sea lions he took care of.
And that was specifically to protect the salmon run?
Protect the salmon, exactly. Huh. So that was the management that went on. And in that era, the early 70s, when all of the environmental laws got passed, you know, you had the Environmental Protection Act, the Clean Air Act,
Marine Mammal
Protection Act is passed in 72. And marine mammals were in terrible shape. I mean, it was really necessary. California sea lions were around 25,000 coastwide. So it's managed as a single stock. It ranges from Baja California up to lower BC.
Okay.
So that stock was 20 or 25,000 animals. Now there's close to 300,000 animals, and it's at carrying capacity. So the Marine Mammal Protection Act protected marine mammals. If you were a marine mammal,
in that
you're
case,
protected.
very effectively, man.
Yeah, and super successful, right?
Yeah.
But what wasn't part of you had sea otters, whales, polar bears, all kinds of things that are super depressed, and there wasn't any thought put into management. You know, it's like, we're going to lose them. We need to protect them. And it worked really, really well on some populations like California sea lions. I mean, they're way past recovered. They're at carrying capacity. It's the classic S curve. It's plateaued. We're at carrying capacity for sea lions coastwide.
Is there any talk of delisting?
Oh, they're not. See, it's different.
Because it's under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, not ESA.
Exactly.
Oh.
So if you're a marine mammal, you're protected. Period.
We've talked about this
no management. There's no management provision at all.
Yeah, we've talked about this a bunch of times in different management things. We were talking about this the other day. I can't remember in what context, but ways in which something gets so bad, you can't picture it getting better, and then you draft regulation like the wild horse. I always point out the Wild Horse and Burro Protection Act. Things get so bad, you draft regulation because you can't picture the future ramifications. And then you wind up laying and you're like, damn, man, we should have thought of that.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like the sea otters up on POW that have exploded.
People are like, well, they'll never be abundant. Why even make a provision for abundance?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just hard to see over the horizon, right? I mean, you see what's there, and it's like it couldn't happen. It gives you hope, though, for salmon, right? Maybe we can do this. But then what happened?
That's a good point, man.
With the Ballard locks up, the the inlet or the outlet of Lake Washington in the 80s. All of a sudden, sea lions started showing up at the Ballard Locks there in Herschel. If you remember that, there's these particular California sea lions started preying on the steelhead run going into the Ballard Locks. And
like they figured it out.
They figured it out. Yeah. And you've got this growing population. They're expanding, right, to different places where they really haven't been in years and years because there's no management. And they're decimating the winter steelhead run in Lake Washington. Well, that triggered legislation then to finally amend the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and they finally got that done in 94, and it was Section 120 that they put into the act. So this was management. It's only on sea lions, and it's that they have to be individually identifiable, and they have to be shown to have a significant negative impact on listed salmon populations.
Okay.
And if you can meet that criteria and you have a permit, you can remove that sea lion.
So it was like, we know this one's a bad egg. We got to get rid of him.
Right. And how do you
That's
know?
great. Yeah.
How do you know what that sea lion is? Well, you got to catch him, and you got to put a brand on him, and you got to have an observer there that sees him eating a fish. Yep. Then you got to trap him again and euthanize him, and so it's very tough. And that was the 120 was not successful at the Ballard Locks. The steelhead population went extinct before the legislation was passed.
Extinct.
Yeah, they're gone. And so then Bonneville Dam,
that run of fish is kaput.
It's gone. And now there's actually a current problem, another problem, which is the sockeye run in Lake Washington, and it's going down that same route. And the only thing to manage there is this Section 120. So they would have to get, they'd have to submit an application to National Marine Fisheries Service to get a permit through this 120.
Yeah, and that's all to do with the Ballard Locks.
That's
not even the Columbia system.
That's not the Columbia.
Because in the Columbia system, I don't know if this is true. I was reading that sea lions take more fish than humans.
Yeah.
Where are they doing that? Because, they're not getting past dams.
Right. So what happened in about 2000, we started seeing sea lions at Bonneville Dam, at the tail race of Bonneville Dam, and it was just a few.
And how far up the river is that?
145 miles.
Wow, those sons of bitches swim that far out of the ocean.
Yeah, and I've got all kinds of stories. We've radio tracked them, and they'll go back to Astoria and back upstream 2 or 3 times in a year. It takes them just a couple of days.
Jeez.
Oh
Are you serious?
They're pretty remarkable animals.
Huh. 140 miles up the river.
Yeah.
Dude, ain't a lick of salt.
Yeah. No. Well, then this problem, once these animals saw, hey, this is the buffet, right? Because you've got this concentration of fish at the tail race. They're trying to find the sea ladder or the fish ladder entrances. And so they're congregating. You get a collection of fish, and the sea lions find that. And it's like, this is great. They come back every year. They bring their buddies. They become habituated with it. And they start taking out a whole bunch of fish. So then the Corps of Engineers who runs the dam.
I gotta back you up on that because this is an unanswerable question. A sea lion goes way to hell up the river, like a pioneer sea lion goes way up the river. He's like, holy smokes, this is the promised land, right? And he goes back down at some point. No one will know. No one can answer this. How is it conveyed? Like, how does it convey to another sea lion?
Couldn't
Do you know
it be,
what I mean?
Probably like wherever Billy was, he's looking
I know,
good.
honeybees have that deal. Honeybees have that deal where they come back and they have like a thing they do. People call it a dance, and they don't perceive it as a dance, I'm sure. But honeybees come back and they have a movement pattern that says, "I'm into it." Heavy duty pollen that way.
Couldn't it just be
Do you know what I mean?
like a generation, like it's like generational learning, like
your kids,
offspring? Yeah,
you bring your offspring.
Yeah, or you bring your mate.
Yeah.
And then you bring your offspring.
Yeah, because your mate's like, what are they doing? I guess don't follow them. Yeah, just like it's so hard to like imagine by the mechanism by which
Yeah.
You come back and then there's more. But yeah, like you just bring your offspring, then some generations down the road, everybody knows that it's the honeypot.
These sea lions that go to Bonneville Dam are like the biggest sea lions that have been recorded. So a California sea lion, and it's only males. So the biology of it is the females
there goes Brody's philosophy.
They stay down in the rookeries that are mainly in the Channel Islands in California. So you know, off Santa Barbara. So that's where the females stay, and they don't venture out of there. They stay very close to those islands.
Well, the males that are going 140 miles up the Columbia are breeding with females in the Channel Islands.
Amazing, huh? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what it is it's like me telling, I found this really good hunting spot. You want to come and check it out with me?
You can't talk though.
But obviously they talk.
They do talk.
So there's photos of them at the rookeries, like on San Miguel Island, where there's a male sea lion, and then all of a sudden there's this gigantic male sea lion. Oh, the brand on him, he was at Bonneville.
Really?
Oh yeah. We have animals that we had captured, branded, and then recaptured 2 months. I think it was 2 months later, a month and a half later. And it gained 400 pounds.
Whoa, that's a lot of salmon.
Yeah, it's a lot of fish. And they do have, so this is the spring of the year. California sea lions arrive at Bonneville early April, and then by the end of May, they leave and they go, because then it's time to go to the breeding grounds. So they leave the system, and the stellar sea lions that are there now, which is a newer story, they also leave the system by the end of May. And then the California sea lions show up back up the next April.
Well, okay, what are they feeding on specifically when they get there that time of year?
At Bonneville, spring chinook.
Okay.
Yeah, spring chinook is that's the big one. And a little bit there's probably some steelhead around as well, but it's primarily spring chinook. They also eat sturgeon. The Columbia River, the lower Columbia sturgeon population has really gone down. And a lot of those would come up, and a big congregating area would be the tail race of Bonneville, and they just got decimated by sea lions.
So they don't.
No.
This is like a two-part question. Those sea lions don't have any impact on like non-native game fish that are in there now, like walleye and smallmouth. And then what kind of impact are the walleye and smallmouth bass having on salmon as well?
Yeah, so they're opportunistic feeders, right? So whatever's the most abundant, that's what they're going to eat. And a sea lion that's at the ocean is going to have a really diverse diet. Yeah. And then the further upriver they go, the more salmon-centric their diet is. And when they get to Bonneville, they're eating, depending on time, they're eating salmon, steelhead primarily. They're eating sturgeon now and then they're eating some lamprey as well. And that's really it. We see a few other things. You'll see sucker, maybe an occasional walleye or whatever. But
do you guys view that like walleye and smallmouth as a big problem for salmon, or is it more like larger predators like sea lions?
Walleye and smallmouth are a problem for sure, and it's probably a bigger problem upstream of Bonneville.
In the reservoirs.
Okay. Yeah. You know, the thing with the sea lion issue that I hadn't really thought of before, but I mean that's almost a dam problem. Like the dam is creating the fishery for the sea lions.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
because it's creating a holding pen for them where they can't get past.
Right. And like you brought up Lewis and Clark, when they went through Celilo, they talk about seeing phoca. Well, they'd never seen a sea lion, so they thought it was a seal. That was what they called seals.
So they were they ran into them way up the Hell River.
So they ran into them there, and they were there in October, right? Late September, early October at Celilo, and they shot one, but they weren't able to collect it. So they were trying to document it and stuff, but
so they had historically used the resource way up the river. Yeah.
So our tribal members are certain that they came up there in the fishery. They took care of the problem. The sea lions didn't stay long as a competitor there. Through the archaeological stuff that they've done, they do find sea lion bones, but not in huge numbers. So they probably had hunts that would go down to get sea lions occasionally, or trade or something. But it isn't like salmon bones that you just see everywhere. So it wasn't nowhere near as important as
Plus, like,
salmon or something like
the
that.
competition factor when you've got 15 million salmon, like there's room for the sea lions to take
Exactly.
what they need.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You say the stellars are coming up there too. They're coming from the north.
Yeah, so as the plot thickens and the story goes on, by the states of Oregon and Washington put in for this 120 permit to remove animals at Bonneville.
I bet the animal rights people love that shit.
Yeah, it was a challenge. Yeah. And they got it. They got the permit in 2008. And that was after documenting the presence of these animals for a long time and how many animals are there, how many fish are they eating, how many days are they staying there, all of that stuff, all of that information was necessary to get the permit. As soon as they got the permit, then so they got a permit to remove California sea lions, and then 2 years later, Steller sea lions are in bigger numbers at Bonneville than California sea lions. And what had happened?
Who's bigger out of a stellar?
Stellars are gigantic. Stellar male, and again, it's males only, and they'll go a ton.
Can you, for people who don't know the difference, can you explain like where the stellars are coming from and versus the California ones?
Yeah, so California sea lions range from British Columbia to southern part of Baja. And the rookeries are primarily in Baja and along California. And then you got a couple of little places at California or along Oregon coast, but that's it. Stellar sea lions are more northern. So they will range down into California, but they'll go up into British Columbia, probably up into Alaska. And you have them
in Southeast Alaska.
Yeah, and you have them broke into two stocks. This is the eastern stock, which is like the 144th latitude. Anything that's east of the 144th degree latitude is the eastern stock of stellar sea lions. And those are the ones that we're getting at Bonneville. To the west of that are the ones that are up in southeast Alaska, off the Aleutians and then further up.
So those dudes aren't coming all the way down to the Columbia.
No, they're not, and they're not in very good shape. They're listed. They're a listed species. Those western stock, the eastern
Dude,
stock.
I know a rock that would beg to differ.
The eastern stock.
I was just thinking of that rock.
The eastern stock was listed as threatened, and then were delisted by 2013, 2012, 2013.
Oh, okay.
So that was why you couldn't, even if they'd have been showing up at Bonneville and it would have been on the permit, the states never would have got a permit to remove them because they were listed. Now they're unlisted, and they are part of the removal program now.
I want to get to that program. I got one little technical question. You mentioned earlier catching them and branding them.
Yep.
Can you explain that? Catching them how and branding them how?
Yeah. So the way we catch them is a trap that's a dock. It's like a 16 by 16 square foot dock with chain link fence around it, a big chain link fence, and then like a gate that's on a guillotine type thing, and you can hold it up with an electronic device to trigger it, so we can remotely drop that gate. You wait for sea lions to get on that trap.
You baiting them or just letting them haul out?
No, so they just haul out. So
Okay.
they want a place to rest, and so you're looking for places for them to haul out. And so that's the
live trap.
That's part of the trick.
Like a big old have a heart.
Is you gotta set these traps where they've been hauling out, where you think you can get them to use, and then they get accustomed to it and they'll haul out, and then you'll drop the trap, and then we have a barge with these transfer cages. You go up against that trap, open the doors, run them into that transfer cage.
He's just pissed, probably.
Yeah, how do they react when you walk up to them?
So stellar sea lions can be pretty ornery. They don't take to it very well. California sea lions are pretty docile.
Huh.
They'll move around.
Fits.
You could get in there with a piece of plywood in front, and you could kind of hurt them, but nobody would do that with a stellar sea lion, right? They're big. I mean, it's a 2,000-pound animal that's pissed. In fact, now we put these arrays. So we take these 16 by 16 traps and we put 3 of them together.
Uh-huh.
A couple of times we had single traps, and you'd get 3 or 4 or 5 stellar sea lions in there, and then they'd start doing the WWF and they'd roll the trap over. So yeah, they're big.
And then you branding them with a cattle brand?
Yeah.
What's the brand?
So a letter up there at C and then a number. at different locations. There's branding programs at different places. The state of Oregon used to brand at Astoria. So there's animals from there. There's, all these different places where studies have been done. They have kind of a coding system.
Where do you hit them, on the hip?
Right on the back.
Okay.
Across the back.
Huh.
How long do they live? Like, are you seeing the same ones year after year after year after?
Right. So these are mature adults that we see primarily. We do see occasionally a few smaller sea lions now, but they can live, like in captivity, they might live to be in their 20s, but they'll probably in the wild, maybe 15.
Okay. And how many, like at peak spring Chinook run, how many are in that dam or at the foot of that dam? How many sea lions?
So from the observation program that the Corps of Engineers does, the highest observed consumption was 10,000 fish that they saw, that they documented being eaten there in a tail race. And
what does that mean? Over how much time?
That's over the spring. So that's April through mid-May to late May.
So they'll see 10,000 Chinook get eaten by sea lions.
And that's cherry picking. That's the top number. But that represented almost 5% of the spring Chinook run that was going over the dam.
Okay, so you're losing 5% to sea lions.
Yeah. Well, that's within this quarter of a mile that you can see from the face of the dam and do the observations. National Marine Fisheries Service has done studies in the lower river where they put pit tags in them. So that's the way we track salmon in the Columbia. And it's basically the same thing that you get in your dog to track them.
Mm.
And there's a huge program in the Columbia where these pit tags go over antennas. It activates the antenna and records the number. So they're all individually numbered. So we know any salmon that we put a tag in, we know by individual. And at all of the dam ladders, like at Bonneville, we have pit tag detectors. So when they cross the dam, we know it. So they captured these by gill netting in the lower river down by Astoria. National Marine Fisheries Service would capture these fish, put pit tags in them, this is spring Chinook, and then release those fish. And also took genetic samples. And with the genetic samples, we could figure out what their origin was. So you could subtract off any fish that were going to lower river tributaries. Also, harvest is highly regulated, and we know what the harvest estimates are for each week. So subtract off harvest, and then you have the number of fish that you tag that should go over Bonneville. And in the biggest year, which was 2015, the biggest loss, 50% of the spring Chinook run was lost between Astoria and Bonneville. And that's peer-reviewed publication, 50% attributed to sea lions.
Mm.
And so we had 200,000 fish were eaten by sea lions, 200,000 fish crossed Bonneville.
Wow.
And that's the largest spring Chinook run we've seen in decades.
Jeez.
And going back to what Steve said, how many sea lions are consuming 200,000 salmon?
Yeah, it's crazy.
You can ballpark it. I mean,
it's not that many,
Right.
that are at Bonneville. It's like, I think a couple of years we've maybe seen 200, a little over 200 individuals.
Okay.
So it isn't huge. And the animals that have been from this group of branded animals, there's a big haul outside at Astoria called the East Mooring Basin. And we'll cite animals there. And then the ones that you'll see at Bonneville or at Willamette Falls, another place where they congregate, similar situation with sea lions, it's only about 7% of that branded population go that far up. But that 7 come back every year, just like you're talking about. They habituate.
They're as faithful as the salmon, man.
Yeah, once they've locked into it, they come back. And we'll see them multiple years, 3, 4, 5 years.
But so the tribal rights, because it seems like sometimes they can trump other laws and rules and regs, but I'm guessing that doesn't work in this case to trump the Marine Mammal Protection Act.
Yeah, because of the act. And that's what I've been talking about is
you guys don't have harvest rights on sea lions.
No. Because historically they didn't come back in those numbers, and they're not coming above Bonneville. Well, we have a few that come above Bonneville Dam that where our gillnet fisheries are only above Bonneville Dam in the Zone 6 fishing area, and so we don't harvest them. Like the big numbers are the lower river, and how you said the sea lions are a dam problem. Well, it goes beyond just the dam problem when they're using that entire stretch of the lower river from Astoria. One year at Astoria, what he was talking about, that East Mooring Basin, I think there were, was it 10,000? 8,000?
It was right around 4,000.
Oh,
Yeah, at the East Mooring
Sea
Basin,
lions.
in the East Mooring Basin, it's not very big. It went from the early 2000s. There would be a couple hundred a year, and they'd do counts every day on these, and they'd haul out on the docks. The East Mooring Basin is not used anymore. Used to be commercial vessels there as well as recreational, and it was taken over by sea lions, basically.
Well, I think what Yanni's asking is like, picture that, like, for instance, I have more familiarity with regulatory structure in Alaska, but there are cases where you have NOAA administered species, you have like U.S. and Fish and Wildlife Service administered species, whatever, but you have like tribal harvest rights,
Mm-hmm.
where like, they can harvest, they can harvest walrus, they can harvest whale species, right? The things that would be off limits to everybody else. If the intertribal group on the Columbia, if you wanted to, you wouldn't have the authority of just saying, we're going to do sea lion control on our own, because we're not beholden to ESA, or we're not beholden to Marine Mammal Protection Act. Like, you don't have that ability, that you don't have that legal ability just to take it into your own hands.
Yeah, we actually have, I know Yakima has written their own resolution, right, which is a tribal law that the taking of sea lions to protect life and property.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny, I actually ended up in that situation where I fish by the city of the Dalles.
Okay.
There was a boat basin, right, where people have houseboats and whatnot. Well, there was one that was actually living on a dock in there, and those people were feeding it. It was there for a couple years, right? It wouldn't leave, and I'd be running my nets and it would be swimming back and forth right next to me. And, they had passed that resolution, and my supervisor at the time was like, you could shoot it. And I was like, yeah, that would be real good optics, Yakima Nation fish biologist. And I don't want to end up in court for the next 10 years. I didn't want to be the test case on it. But in hindsight, maybe I should have.
Like, and you could have.
Yeah, I could have. But those types of things are happening. But like I said, the animals aren't up where we gillnet.
Yeah.
They're down below, so it would be hard for us to, and we still have those laws in place, but, and a lot of it is just being good co-managers, right? We don't want to, we want to work together with.
You don't want to go rogue and
yeah,
on that kind of thing.
Yeah, because there's so many other issues. Like we talk about death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Yeah.
This predation, the sea lion is a huge impact, but there's tons of other things that we work together on.
No,
So,
I got you.
Yeah, so we're just pushing.
Like, if you make too much smoke around this sea lion issue, and you create like a bad optics situation, it could impact you addressing all of the other issues that are making the problem.
And funding as well. Just because you get the permit doesn't mean that you're getting any funding. That comes from appropriations and things like that. Is so this the program that we have, like how Doug's explaining, the trapping, and it has to be chemically euthanized by a licensed veterinarian and things like that. So it's really inefficient, like because there's that's in the act, right? That it has to be chemically euthanized by a licensed veterinarian. Like, it would be so much easier if you had it and you could just shoot it. That's humane as well. Like, rather than dragging them through all of that.
Got it.
Yeah, like torture before leading them to their death. And, it's really inefficient, the laws that are put upon us to be able to do this work. Like, we could be doing a lot more, like darting. You could dart to euthanize, but then you have to be able to recover the animal as well. So it's like you have no choice but to trap. And, like you said, you see the same animals. And as I was mentioning too, like, it's not just a dam problem anymore. That's why I brought up how many come to the mouth at Astoria. There's thousands there, but they're learning traits like when we have smelt runs returning, when we have sizable smelt runs coming up, and historically they were in the lower tributaries, and a lot come back to the Cowlitz River. Well, the sea lions follow the smelt up to the Cowlitz River, and there'll be hundreds, like 500 plus sea lions at the mouth of the Cowlitz feeding on the smelt, which
Really?
are also threatened as well.
Okay.
And there was
So they'll narrow down on something that small. I didn't know that.
Mhm. And so they follow up the smelt. They hang around there. When the smelt run trickles off, then they could move upstream, like to the Lewis River, and eat, juvenile salmonids leaving the system. And then by then, it's time to head up to Bonneville because you have spring chinook coming. So they're exploiting that whole stretch of the lower river, and the removal program starts at the I-205 bridge up to McNary Dam. So it's really site specific. We don't have the ability or the flexibility to address to these changing needs. For one, we don't have funding. It's largely underfunded. There's so much red tape in how you do things. It's inefficient, and we don't have the ability to react and take action where it's necessary. Like Doug said about that steelhead population in Ballard Locks going extinct. The same thing could happen with their sockeye. Same thing could happen with ours. And there's no hierarchy. There's no act amongst the act about how the MMPA plays into the ESA. And another whole can of worms is the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, right? You have huge avian impacts of gulls and things like that
Got
are
it.
eating, like up to 70% of juvenile steelhead leaving the system
Are getting eaten by gulls.
Yeah.
Yeah, gulls, cormorants.
Yeah. And then now we have
Terns.
pelicans too that are feeding on adult sockeye. Like I mentioned that year that we had the 800,000 returning past Bonneville, the majority going to Lake Okanagan, half of them died because that year there was also a heat dome, warm, lethal temperatures. There were swimming zombies, and pelicans just eating them like crazy. We have pelicans that are resident
Uh-huh.
in the Columbia. It's like a couple thousand breeding pairs, right? It's a ton. They don't leave the system anymore.
And you can't just go out and start doing control measures on
Mhm.
those. I guess cormorants were delisted, at least some
No,
kinds were.
They're all protected.
They're all protected under the
Migratory Bird Act.
Oh, yeah, but
And
but there's places where they're
There are
doing
places.
cormorant, like they're squishing the
True.
nests and shit,
Yep.
Yeah.
True.
It takes so much to get to that. Like you wouldn't even think the seagulls you see everywhere at dumps and at places eating French fries, right? How protected they are. There's a rocks like by island in the mid Columbia, right? It's called Miller Island, and it's just the outcropping of rocks where there's this gull colony that I think it was like they were attributed to eating mid Columbia steelhead. 31% of the juveniles out migrating from that one colony, and we're still working in that process. Like you have to do so much effort of non-lethal hazing where
Mhm.
we're using like boom cannons, and the next year we used a falcon, and then finally we were able to do some lethal take and able to oil like some eggs and things like that. But when you do those things, you're just playing whack-a-mole. You're just moving
Sure,
them
that's what it sounds like.
somewhere else. So there's really or no ability to manage even on that. And so
Yeah,
and
that
then-
river would flow with blood, man, if you just needed to get rid of everything that was eaten. Everything that was eating
yeah.
salmon.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing is fish always kind of get the short straw when it comes.
Mhm.
Like you can't be shooting birds that people like to watch or sea lions that people like to. It's,
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing. There's no act amongst the acts. There's no hierarchy. How do
Mhm.
we have these species, these fish that are on the brink of extinction, and these sea lions that are exceeding carrying capacity. That's why they're moving to find other food sources, and like looking at the future with sea level rise and change and everything. That was what Doug's been working on with NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, as well, looking at impacts to the juvenile outmigration. That's what he says. They eat a lot more French fries than we ever imagined.
Mhm.
So
Hmm. Are you guys involved in the? I have an older brother. He's in his early 80s. He's been turning in he fishes the Columbia every day in the summer. He's been turning in, he's been doing a lot of bounty hunting on on the pike minnows.
Right.
What's the story with that? Are you guys involved in that?
We're not peripherally, but I mean, Washington, state of Washington is the one that runs that program.
Is that like productive, or is that just like tiddlywinks? Like, is that, you think it's just pissing in the wind, or yeah?
Yeah, because when you have a bounty like that, you have people exploiting it, right? And I think there was somebody that was growing some, out
Oh
there.
my gosh!
And
Really?
Because some dudes are clearing $100,000 a year on that bounty. He's not.
Yeah.
He was telling me he recently had a check for $70-some.
But,
Covered his gas.
yeah, it's
Well,
just
he's primarily a smallmouth fisherman, but he likes to make a little side money on northern pike minnows.
Yeah, and with that being an actual native species, just the change in the reservoir system, but I think we're getting a lot bigger issue on the predation from the warm water fish, the bass and walleye.
Oh, like there's more, that's doing more damage than northern pike minnows.
Probably.
And then I got buddies, like, God bless them, I got buddies that like to fish smallmouth there. They're all up in arms about people pointing the finger at smallmouth.
Yeah, that's what I was getting.
Because it's like
earlier.
the crumb fight, dude. The crumb fight is a complex crumb fight.
Why would you want to get rid of this beautiful game fish?
Yeah, exactly. And then you have these gigantic walleye that they're catching up there around Umatilla area, right? And so it's attracting people to come there to catch these big walleye. Well, a big walleye eats a lot of smolts.
Yeah, there's probably some group like walleye fishermen of the Columbia, that's like fighting to like preserve the walleye or whatever,
Up and down, it is, and that's a big issue. Like, and then you have the fishing guides, right? They say, well, that's our off season from salmon. It's like, restore the salmon, then you'd have a lot more salmon openings. Like they show those big walleye and they cut them open, and there's like tons of smolts in them, and multiply that.
This guy down here, big walleye guy.
Guilty.
You could have them. Come get them all you want.
You know what shows that mind frame is like totally different water system, but you familiar, here we have the Yellowstone Park, and Yellowstone Lake had at some point in time they put lake trout in there, which is real detrimental to the cutthroats. And so at one point they like made it that I think it was mandatory retention. Like if you caught it, you had to kill it. I had a buddy, he lived here in town years ago. He would love that, to go up there and fish. And I remember I was asking him about it, and he's like, yeah, I like to hit it, but I'm always conscious to not damage the resource. About the lake trout. Because like people just that's just how people's minds work, Like you go out and you catch some big old smallmouth, and then it's just, there's like a certain human adaptability, I guess, man. Like people, maybe you get fatalistic or pessimistic or something, and you get where the salmon thing's not gonna get fixed. And I love the fish, and they're not gonna fix that. So I'm here for smallmouth. I'm here for walleye, and that'll do for me.
No, I'd much rather see the 100-pound chinook.
Dude, for sure. But I'm saying, I'm just trying to get into the, like, like that's probably, without even thinking about it, that's where people arrive.
Plus, you're like you've created a recreational fishery that never existed before, so people jump on it.
Yeah.
Do we know how? And stop me if I'm going to jump ahead too much, but I got to get this question.
Are you going to ask why can't we just get rid of all the dams? Because that's
no, but it is dam related. But do we know how now, with all of our knowledge, to do hydroelectric power and salmon simultaneously? Is there has
technologically?
Has someone figured out how to do it, but we just don't have the funds to do it? Like, is there a way to make these things not be part of the central, system of the river, where like the nature could still do its thing, but offset from that, you'd have hydroelectric power?
It's ever changing goalposts, right? There's no limit, or there's no oversight of carrying capacity. It's always more. Like there's room for salmon in the Northwest, in the environment with this amount of electricity, and that's spill, right? Having spill, keeping the river a river. and not just, the way they want to operate it for the grid stability is to turn it off and on like a battery, like a light switch,
Mhm.
and which is unnatural, like you have, your peak loading and things like that to support industry and things like that. So that's what's really damaging. You don't have the spill to flush out the juvenile salmon, because
You mean
that's
a
when
spring runoff?
hmm
Okay.
and then even in the summertime, right? Like late spring when fish are moving out, like the journey that used to take 2 weeks now takes 2 months, and they've expended so many of their resources before they even get to the ocean that survival decreases. And the same thing when adults are returning, you have, the temperature of the Columbia is warming earlier and earlier every year, so that you have it's reaching 68 degrees like days earlier. We have a chart that I could share with you over time of when you're reaching these lethal temperatures, and that's why we have dying sockeye now. Before, we used to be seeing those getting up to the lethal temperatures in the fall, but then you'd get fall rains that would cool it back down, but you're not seeing that anymore. So it's just a lot. That's why the litigation has been there for so many years, is because its hydro operations is the huge factor in survival.
But is there however you measure the amount of electricity? Okay, like take any particular dam and you measure how much. What do they measure it as? What is the dam measured as? It puts off blank
megawatts, I
Okay.
think. Yeah.
To Yanni's point, it'd be like if you take a dam and it produces 100 megawatts, I don't know what the hell, 100 megawatts. Would an engineer now look and go like, oh man, nowadays I could give you 100 megawatts without all that, or I could give you 100 megawatts with a much better fish passage system were we to start from scratch? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there ways in which there's an engineering solution? And I always saying like they're constantly asking for more and more and more megawatts. But if there weren't, just theoretically, if they weren't asking for more megawatts, could you get it all in a way that wasn't so damaging to the fish now that we have all these technological advancements that have occurred since 1950?
Yeah, that's tough to do. So, and all of them are different, right? Wells Dam, which is one of the highest passable dam on the Columbia, has what they call a hydro combined. So the spillway sits, and then underneath it is the pin stocks for the powerhouse. Well, an attraction flow for the pins is all in one place, and you can kind of direct your fish up into the spillway and get them over. Other places, you've got the spillway a quarter of a mile away from where the powerhouse is. Some of them are built at an L. I mean, every one of them is a different place because they had to be to put them in those locations. And so I think it would be like the complete tear down and rebuild.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure cost would be huge. And
Understood.
unless NERF starts making turbines, there isn't really a way to do it,
Yeah. So there's not like retrofitting and things. It's just they built them and that's what they are.
They're better and better.
They're updating. We just visited. I toured John Day Dam recently, which is I think the third largest power producer. We have Grand Coulee, Bonneville, and then John Day, and the size of the turbines are huge. Like you go in there, like the dam doesn't look that big when you're driving, but the width of it, those turbines in there, I think they're like 60 or 90 foot diameter.
Okay.
Like that's how big, and they're like 30 feet tall. Like there's one that's needed repairs. They had it lifted. You could see it. They've been doing repairs on it for 10 years. And they were saying that one's the next one scheduled to be updated with this newer turbine that they have at Bonneville. And that's supposed to be, more fish safe and water efficient.
Because these are literally they're literally hitting fish and killing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What
But just going on the scale is like, I had to physically see it to understand, like, my God, these things are massive in the amount of money. Like that project scheduled to start in, I think he said 2030, cost several $1 billion and take 20 years to complete. So
and that's
even if
that's fixing existing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
there's like has to be these power companies are like have to be under some pressure to at least on the face of things show that they're doing things to help these runs. Like, what kind of partners are they to work with? Like, is it just like, do you feel like it's just lip service, or is there like a bona fide effort to help out, or like what's the relationship with these power companies?
Well, the hardest thing is because it's not a power company, it's the federal government,
Okay.
right? So they could more or less do what they want
Mhm.
on the time scale that they want, and how things get done with, 10 years of studies and appropriations 5 years out, and it's not even sufficient for today's dollar, let alone in 5 years.
So the
Yeah.
dams are
So-
managed by the federal government.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're operated
Corps of Engineers.
Corps
or-
of
yeah.
Engineers, and the business end, the marketing end of the power is Bonneville Power Administration,
Okay.
and that's 100% a business focused on money, not looking at mitigation. They have the Fish and Wildlife Program. Like, there's been years of like unanticipated revenues. Like, they've made like millions and millions more than they anticipated. Okay, so the Fish and Wildlife Program is X amount. They have all this unanticipated revenue. There's a cap on how much goes to the Fish and Wildlife Program. The rest of it, they go back to pay down their debt with the feds, and they also give breaks. They give money back to their industrial users. Like, what company
So
does that?
do they just kind
Yeah.
of view you guys as like a fly buzzing in their ear?
Yeah,
It's sad.
Really?
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
the solutions aren't new. I mean, basically, it's run a river more like a natural river. The more you could do that, the better it is for fish. But
You
at
mean
the-
like even with the dams?
Yeah.
Even there's like even with the dams in place. I guess that's kind of like I guess I'll jump to what would be sort of a version of my last question would be. Years ago, we had Mike Simpson on, and Idaho representative, House of Representatives. He came on, and he was at the time. I don't think it went anywhere. He was pitching a plan on a dam removal plan, which had so many facets around agricultural production, shipping, and all that. And it came with this stipulation that were they to do this removal project, all the litigants, all the environmental groups, imagine tribes, would agree to sort of this like cease. They would stop lawsuits for some period of time on fisheries. That dam's still standing, right? So like a sort of like broad ultimate question would be, what are the odds that dams come out? Like, if you had to crystal ball a century into the future, do we have fewer dams then? And then the offshoot of the question is if no, the dams will never, it's not real, the major dams will never go away. Then it's what could be done differently. And you're kind of getting at, I guess, like the dams could still be there, but there are other things that are plausible that could help.
Yeah, you got to run it as close to a natural river as you can. It's priorities, right? If you prioritize fish passage higher than you do now, it's prioritized for dam or for power production.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's maximize or optimize power production. And then whatever's left, it's the crumbs. Whatever's left, we could do what we can around the edges for fish. But if you raise that and made the fish more important, you can look at papers from the 50s. They knew some of the solutions. These aren't new, but it's always been that the money is from the dams and the power production, and that's run the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
And it all operates and revolves around that.
Did they, when they were conceptualizing those dams, I've asked other people this question. I don't know if I ever got like a great answer to it, but like when they were pitching the dams, the engineers, right, everybody's getting together on these dams. Did they realize, do you think they knew? Do you think their discussions included conversations about how catastrophic this would be for fish? Like, did they knew?
There was actually the memos were discovered by OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting, recently. Tony Schick did a series, Salmon Wars podcast. But yeah, he had the memos that talked about the kind of the cost benefit analysis. Like I said, the salmon became a problem because then they'd have to put in fish passage, and they also labeled it as an Indian problem. We get rid of the salmon. We don't have to deal with the Indian problem on the main stem river anymore. So that was, and all of those, it was a choice, even on the upper
Like
reaches.
they were wide-eyed about it.
Because they looked at building Bonneville without passage, with or without, and thankfully with. But you look up in Hell's Canyon Dam, there's no passage, but there could be. They could bore through the mountain for their turbines, to make the turbines more efficient, but they couldn't provide passage. So all of those things, you visit them, it was a choice, and all based on cost, and also looking at long-term maintenance. And you talked about, like, will these be here forever? No, because there's lack of maintenance. Like Doug said, like, okay, all the money and the emphasis is put on power production, and things get fixed really fast. But when there's an issue with the passage thing, or especially monitoring, that's the first thing to get sliced off of the budget.
Is that right? Really?
And you were talking about, litigation. We had that stay in litigation, which was going good. We were just getting started. But in June of 25, it was canceled, terminated by the current administration. So we lost all of that headway that we had made over those couple of years with the Biden administration. So we're back to, we still have the 6 sovereigns working together, pushing to advance those efforts and looking for appropriations, but we don't have the commitments from the agencies of the federal government, the Bureau of Reclamation, Army Corps, and everything like that to address these problems. And when we started our advocacy, we were talking about the $1 billion backlog in needs in the Columbia Basin. Well, once we started writing it down on paper, it actually came out to be like $2 billion, like $1 billion in passage at the dams, and then like another $1 billion in hatchery maintenance, because they built these hatcheries. They're so outdated and never reach full production. They have failing intakes, crumbling raceways. They're not efficient. And so the things that we advocate for isn't just for us. It's actually, can you appropriate the money for you to fund yourself to do the things that you should be doing? And then even, looking at habitat restoration and, the roads and culverts and irrigation intakes and everything. We're just like out there looking for everybody to do the right thing of what we all should be doing for our environment. And, it's like a shared responsibility from all of us. And the Yakima Nation, we were involved with a dam removal project. It didn't get as much media attention as like Elwha Dam, but it was actually a bigger project, and it took like 19 years for that dam removal. And the only reason it got done, it was because it was with a private company. It was Pacific Corps. And then it came down to the license. For them to update the license, they had to either provide passage or take it down. And then they drug that out for 5 years. The tribes, Yakima and CRITFC, actually pitched in money together to fund the study, the cost-benefit analysis that showed that removal would be cheaper. And then Pacific Corps finally breached it. But it's like we have to hold their hand and walk them through everything and keep pushing all the time. It's just more like
pushing and paying
to hold them accountable of things that they should be doing and funding things appropriately. We could have these acts and permits and everything, but unless we have the resources to enact them, it's meaningless. So
I'm going to go out on a limb on this one, but I mean, the way the Trump administration is playing out with their like conservation record, I can't imagine they're of any help on salmon issues. It's got to be low priority to them.
It was actually the Trump administration that signed the permit for the pinniped removal, right, during these first.
Oh, so really?
Yeah, but the thing that we get from congressionals, and actually our supervisor, our executive director, actually just testified in Congress last month on this pinniped issue, and we're a Republican witness because, and we have our
I
local,
can see it being. I was thinking of that being like an interesting trade off. Is what the administration is going to give you is probably greater latitude, because of a general suspicion of some of these acts that were passed, greater latitude for some things like removal of species, but sort of just like generally less sympathy about river flows and things, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's what we're after, is that, there's no management provision in the Marine Mammal Protection Act. We'd like an amendment to add management provisions. And so a way that you could analyze the problem, and if it's river otters somewhere, or if it's California sea lions or stellars or whatever the problem is, there would be a process you could go through to get some management in place and be able to do that. I guess I get quickly back to the sea lion thing. What we talked about earlier was the 120 removals, and then there was an amendment that was passed in 2018. It was signed by Trump in his first administration, that did recognize the co-management of the tribes. So our 4 treaty tribes were able to be party to permits along with the states, and then our tribes could delegate to CRITFC to do that. And we've been doing that since, but it's, red tape is a killer, because that was passed in December of 2018. We immediately applied for a permit, and our joint permit was finally issued in August of 20. So 2 years, and then we start implementing it. And then that provision, it's 120F, it allows area management. So that was above the 205 bridge. If an animal's up there, he's individually identifiable, and he's having a significant negative impact. So if you can collect that animal, you can euthanize it. But it's very restrictive. You can't go out and specifically, you can't shoot them. You have to trap, chemically euthanize. So there's still some burden to it, but it isn't the level that we used to do when it was individual sea lion management. So it's a little better, but it only applies to the Columbia.
So on the question about the different administrations, I don't want to put you in a rough spot, but maybe my assumption is wrong. But like, I just remember years ago, I can't remember if it was the first time Trump was running. He was in California, and he was like ridiculing the Delta smelt, like, why would you ever sacrifice anything for some little fish? And I think there's just like in that way, like sort of a dismissiveness about some fisheries issues. But have you guys found that, like, have you gotten more done during the Trump administrations than you do during the Biden administrations, or is it not that simple?
No, it's not that simple. A lot has to do with funding that's coming into the federal agencies. The federal agencies now that we work with have been gutted, right? So there's less people to do the same amount of work and with less money, which is a problem. And
so you felt the impact of like some of the cuts to the land management agencies. Also a red tape reduction. So less money and less red tape.
No, it's still there. It's just the processes just take longer now, or you don't have somebody there you don't have that human there to process this permit, which we ran into last year on a tagging project. Like, we couldn't access that area because there was the person was Doge that wrote that permit for us.
I see.
And just things like that. I think around this predation thing is like the one crumb that we could actually get done during this time. And because, like I said, we were a Republican witness and resistance to change, and we're mindful of, ag and transportation and things like that, but we're looking for responsible ways to do things. There's beyond the status quo, and, there's a lot of interest in just protecting the dams. So they're quick to point at sea lions. They are a huge impact, but that's not the only impact. But if that's the only thing we could get right now, then we need to maximize our effort and jump on that and get these things done now while we have the chance, while the focus is on that.
That's a conservation gamble that just in the conservation movement at large, that is a gamble that causes, for people that like things simple, that's a gamble people have to live in that makes people uncomfortable, especially people that want things to be very cut and dried, good guy, bad guy, really simple. But that an organization, yourselves or any number of conservation organizations. With a new administration comes in, and you're like, here's all the things we're not going to get. But there's this, and we can be friendly and try to get this one thing, or we can dig in our heels and spend 4 years with nothing. You know what I mean? And a lot of people want you just to dig in your heels and get nothing rather than look like you're cooperating, And then it flips. Then 4 years later, it flips the other way around. You're like, killing sea lions is out.
Yeah.
Right? But we might get some sympathy on this other issue,
It was really hard. We were kind of a perfect storm we ran into was we had that we've had this Accords agreement since 2008. It's the Bonneville Fish Accords, where it was a 10-year agreement, 2008 to 2018, where there was a set program. We said we won't sue you and you fund these programs. And the benefit in that is we weren't having to justify and fight every year for funding to do this or that. We're really micromanaged.
Mhm.
Even now today, we're still really micromanaged as fish managers, the expert, micromanaged by the funding agencies, of course, because they control the purse strings. And that's still a frustration for us. But the Accords gave us the ability to do non-ESA work and work on things like sturgeon and lamprey and things like that, kind of expand what we were doing. And we made a lot of progress. And since then, we never signed another long-term agreement. We went through 2 3-year extensions in 18 and so we were just starting to negotiate a new long-term agreement. Bonneville rolled the dice on the election and they won. We didn't get another agreement and they gave us another extension. But in that, and I mentioned the litigation on the hydro operations around ESA, the ESA litigation. And so we were in that stay. We were living good, looking forward to another, favorable administration, and it flipped the opposite way. We lost that agreement. It was terminated. And then this Bonneville piece, the Accords ended. They have no written legal binding commitment to us except this really hard, long process of, the Power Council, the Northwest Power Act, their commitments to the Fish and Wildlife Program, their responsibilities. It's really tough. So the Accords ending, and then there was money left over from that was tied up in their years of red tape to build facilities or do certain projects. Well, when the tribes signed to take the litigation back into court, the stay was ended. Okay, let's reinitiate this litigation. Bonneville viewed that as a negative action towards them. And they said, we don't owe you that money anymore. You violated the Accords. It was $50 million to the tribes that they're still, our tribes are having to go to DC to lobby to get that money back. We have projects we've been working on for 15 years.
And that would have been $50 million towards salmon.
Mm-hmm.
Not like for people to walk home and put in their bank accounts.
No, it was all earmarked for projects that we weren't able to get done on the ground because of their red tape.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
I got a question about the Klamath. Like the dams aren't coming down on the Columbia, right? At least not anytime soon. But a year or two ago when they took out the 4 dams on the Klamath, it's like now seen as a success for salmon. I know you guys are focused on the Columbia, but is there like opportunities like the Klamath on other rivers besides the Columbia?
Yeah, that one I mentioned on the white salmon, the one that we did with Pacificor, which is funny, that was the same company that owned the Klamath dams that removed them. And it was a lot because of, reservoir succession and things were so bad in that system. They had no choice, which we're seeing in the Columbia every year by a degradation of water quality, sediment accumulation, and things like that. We're not keeping up in the Columbia either. And like I mentioned, that the dam on the Little White Salmon that was removed, but it took 19 years to do that.
Yeah, they
I
got the
couldn't
ones
even
down on the Klamath pretty quick. It seemed like.
No, they
No?
were in the
It was
fight for decades
okay.
as well. You just don't hear about it
Right.
until like things
Yeah,
are
it's
happening.
like, oh, they're taking them down. Then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
they're down.
Yeah,
know?
and then always, like I mentioned, the only reason we got that dam removed is because of the licensing process that required fish passage. It was the same thing on the Klamath. They could have done fixes to maintain the dams, but it was cheaper for them to take them out. Like how you were saying, it's like things get costed out, and it's not like, yay, we won, they did the right thing. It's like they did what was cheapest for their pocket.
Yeah.
That's always the trade-off. So I think
How quickly when a dam comes down like that, like in the Klamath or whatever, how quickly do you see results in terms of fish passage?
the next year, it was like that in the White Salmon when we removed that dam. Actually, a few years ago, we had a 10-year returning salmon celebration there because they thought it would take like several years to rebuild, but those fish have been coming back. Like you open the door, they're gonna
Yeah, there was salmon that were
reconnect.
running the Klamath this past fall, I think.
Yeah. So it was that very
They're
next
going up there
year.
like, this place is sweet.
Yeah. This is the place my grandma was talking about. But yeah, it's just when you reconnect, have those openings, then they're going to find the resources and return to those areas. They find their niche.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and I see Doug has some pretty cool pictures of sea lions at Astoria. I was bringing it out.
Yeah, we'll have to show you those. I guess we don't have a great media for that, but yeah.
Well, we can share them with Phil, and he can put them on.
Okay,
the,
yeah,
on the
yeah, pretty
YouTube
astounding.
probably
These
later.
were from 2015 when the kind of been the peak of the sea lion issue, but they're just like all the docks in the East Mooring Basin and Astoria are completely covered with sea lions, and then they're patrolling in the water trying to find a spot to get out.
I keep sort of asking this, and I think Brody asked too, but I just want to be clear on it. Like, in a century, the big, like in 100 years, the big Columbia dams will still be there.
It's hard to say because things are getting so bad now. Like you're starting to have closures of parks and boat ramps and areas because of toxic algal blooms in the summer because of heat. And I know right there in the Tri-Cities, there's been dogs that are dying. People, the dogs are running around in the water. And so I think when it starts, it's going to start impacting people and those types of resources because of the degradation of water quality. And
If we didn't do it for salmon, we might do it for dogs.
Oh yeah, if it starts
It's
hurting
gonna
their
be-
furry pets, buddy.
and cattle.
The wrong suburbanite's
Yeah.
dog,
Yeah.
and they're going to be like, this cannot stand.
Yeah. And then, like when cattle end up in those toxic algal bloom situations, it's like, well, if you would have just had this buffer from the stream to protect the nutrient loading in your creek, then your cattle wouldn't have died.
Got
But
it.
they're still up in arms about their cattle dying because of
So
that.
it could be like a broader litany of environmental degradations could bring up in the future more serious discussions about
Mhm.
like doing something really radical.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like I mentioned the 6 sovereigns, and then we had that resilient Columbia Basin Agreement, but our negotiating piece was the creation of the Columbia Basin Restoration Initiative. That's an initiative that's created and vetted by the 6 sovereigns. It's the tribes, because our tribes, we've had with CRITFC, we've had the Waikanashmi-Wakishwit, for 20 years, that set these recovery plans and recovery goals. Well, this was taking that to the next step and coming together with our co-manager. It's our guiding North Star that we're still working towards. And so that's what we're looking at today about, habitat restoration in the mid-Columbia, and also, like I mentioned, it's cold water refugia, the through the migration corridor of the Columbia, where you have the tributary mouths, the deltas that are all full of sediment, and have all the predation and water quality issues and things like that. So we're able to like have this input of cold water to corral so that returning adults, they have respite as they travel these hundreds of miles upstream. And that's something that's doable today. We just got to break through the red tape and get the funding to actually do it. And that would be a huge benefit for salmon. Like we have all these recovery plans for the basins and, habitat projects just waiting to be funded. And then addressing these things, predation. I've been the squeaky wheel about predation over the past few years, like the pinniped predation, but also the avian predation and the piscine, the warm water predators. But there's also invasives that are heavily impacting our river system, and that's American shad. Those were introduced in the 1800s, and there was a very problematic, I saw article from the Seattle Times on the shad issue that they're just becoming accepted. That was the title. There's a new top fish in the Columbia and it doesn't mind the warm water. Where we've had years of 8 million shad returning.
Roe shad, yeah.
And so that's totally unnatural, and that's that feeds the predators when because their life cycle is opposite. So when these warm water predators, the salmonids are out, they're eating juvenile shad, and then you have all the pelicans that are feasting on shad, and they're spawning in the main stem, so it's a huge nutrient load. And so you have all this aquatic vegetation and algae growth because it's not meant to be there, right? You have barren tributaries that don't get those marine nutrients, but they're all piled in the main stem, and why the main stem's green now and muck. And
but dude, go ahead, Brody.
One more. You hinted at how far these salmon will go earlier. If those dams weren't there, like what would be the terminal point for these chinook? Like how far would they go and where would they end up?
I know, like distance-wise in the Snake Basin would be at Twin Falls, because you have the falls it's huge, and then they went all the way up into the tributaries and the headwaters in Canada. That little piece of Montana where the Kootenai is, and like you have the Wenatchee, the Methow, the Entiat, and the Yakima Basin. So all up into the Cascades, up into Canada, around to Montana, how far it stretches, Idaho, and even Nevada, right?
Yeah. It's incredible, man.
Yeah, steelhead did go all the way up the Owyhee River there into Nevada. You'd get them up the Salmon River, up past Stanley, almost to Galena Summit, right at the headwaters of the Salmon, which is like 40 miles north of Sun Valley.
So like twice as far as where you were seeing them.
Yeah. And even like the other species, like how I said, we're, comprehensive and holistic in our salmon recovery efforts, like lamprey. I think, we put, they're a sacred food source to us. And they were also medicinal, like because they're so oily that was your skin salve and your eardrops and stuff when, before you could go to the drugstore. But the benefit that they brought to the system and all of the nutrients in the forests and the animals and like forest habitat, like they're lacking those marine driven nutrients for the standing forests. And then also like management. I think back to, I watched your hunting show, Blue Mountain Bulls, and it was on fire, right? There was forest fire. We're seeing that more and more. It's forest management practices, but also, like we don't have the same nutrients coming into the forest to grow. But, that's the other side of the aspects. We will touch all aspects of it. And I think lamprey is a huge part of that. Doug showed me a picture. It's in the Bruno River that flows into Nevada. They dewatered this dam or whatever. They're standing on the cement. There's like thousands and thousands of lamprey, and that's hundreds of miles from the ocean in this one little tributary. Imagine how many there were all throughout the basin, the millions and millions, and all of that's gone now. And there's an effect. It's a ripple effect through the entire ecosystem. And so us just to try to put all these building blocks back together to to create that better tomorrow, because we can't restore the salmon back to barren streams, even looking at, benthic organisms and things like that. So, working with beavers and all of that stuff. So we're coming at it from all angles.
And to bring it back to your simiparous fish, see, these fish died, right? They go up and they die, and they brought all those nutrients from the ocean back to the forest,
Yeah.
and they get hauled out by bears and otters and everything else and brought in. And so the whole thing has been cut off. Those forests have lost all of that nutrient input for 100 years, 150 years.
My brother's a fisheries biologist in Alaska, and they've been tracking that with marine isotopes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all these like traceable elements.
Yeah, strontium is one that they
that came from the ocean.
Yep.
And the way it got from the ocean into the mountains was on a fish.
Right.
And then you look at how that stuff is used by vegetation and animals, and it's like marine, just a picture of like that fish are a way of like wheel barrowing in nutrients into nutrient poor regions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you pluck that out, and it's like you're not fertilizing it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you get up, like I said, in that upper part of the salmon, it's just granitic soil. There's no nutrients to speak of up there. Ultra clear water, it's gin clear, but the nutrients aren't coming from what's running
'cause
off.
they used to get millions of pounds of natural fertilizer.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And the other thing you were like, Janis, you were asking, is there a way to operate the hydro system and still have salmon? But like I said, the ever-changing goalposts and maybe things that would help would be like, bringing on renewables and also battery storage. So you're not depending on the river to be your battery that you turn off and on. But then there's impacts, there's trade-offs in everything you do. But that's where the tribes come in and advocate to do things in a responsible manner. Like all of our tribes have their own, utilities. We're looking at different types of energy production. And that was part of the agreement in the litigation was funding for energy projects, administered by the tribes, like the Yakama Nation. They're working on a solar over irrigation project, and also a dry pump storage project using railroad cars that you lift up and down the hill. And they're working at pump storage at several places. One is a really big issue for our tribes, and especially the Yakama Nation, is the Goldendale pump storage project. They want to withdraw water from the Columbia, build a reservoir up on the hill, and then they just pump it in a loop. They generate power when they need it, and then pump it back up off peak when it's cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you have all these. For one, they're boring through the mountain, and then they want to tap into the John Day power line system to export that power. And then there's also a Superfund site below from an abandoned aluminum smelter that's never been cleaned up. And it's one of our sacred sites. It's like Pushpum. It's like the mother of all roots. It's a place where we still go and gather. And they just like, okay, yeah, you move aside and we're going to do this here now. And it's literally drilling a 30-foot diameter tunnel through the mountain. And you'll see that also all in the surrounding area of the windmills, the wind generation, which, like, why does it have to be all on our native lands, open lands? Like, isn't there like low value agriculture that they could incorporate agrivoltaics and things like that? It's always looking at what's cheapest and easiest. And that's like these public lands that they get a 30-year lease from. And, once they go in and alter it, it's never the same. And it impacts the withdrawals from the river for these things. And even the solar has huge impacts to the water table because they need water to clean the solar panels. So there's a huge water usage even with solar production. So what we're saying is we're not against all of these things, but like, let's not be in a rush to do it, and let's do things right. And we can't put all of these burdens on the backs of the salmon and all the users who depend on them, the tribal people and the community members, because we're the ones that these resources are extracted and all the burden is placed on us, and it's all goes outside. It's all international companies exporting power to California into these industrial users and data centers and things like that. It's like again and again the same story. So let's do things, slow down, do things better. Like, yeah, we need to do better, find renewables, but let's do it right. So not just what's cheapest. What's cheapest today may not be in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if they would have put more maintenance into the hydro system now, we wouldn't have these $1 billion backlogs and things like that. So
Yeah. Man, I was hoping you guys were going to tell me something that's going to put me all in a good mood.
Well, they got some success stories we should go over.
Yeah.
Well,
let's close out with some
There's
success
this
stories.
too. There's like, speaking of boogeymen, like I feel like we grew up and the lamprey was the devil of all devils.
That's non-native.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, but still,
You know.
like I've never heard of a good lamprey, and here you guys are trying to like promote it. So can we just touch on that a little bit? Yeah, because when we grew up in Michigan, it was like when you went to the hatchery, we had I can't remember the name of the hatchery now. They're in Kalamazoo, but like every year you'd go on a field trip there, and like it would just be nothing but placards on the walls about how the lamprey is just killing off everything.
It's
in
like
the
a
Great
system
Lakes.
it's like any invasive species story. It's a system that hadn't adapted with it. And then all of a sudden, ta-da, here's a bunch of lampreys. And like every non-native species story, it just explodes at great expense to native fish. And so then you hear like, oh, you know, where they are from.
But in your neck of the woods, they coexist.
yeah, and they have that relationship, right? They're parasitic but not lethal. You could see sometimes you catch salmon, it has a little round mark with the teeth.
They were
That's
lethal to
what-
lake trout.
Yeah,
in
but
the Great Lakes system, they were killing. Yeah, because again, it was a fish that hadn't adapted with the risk. You know.
yeah, so they are parasitic. But they don't kill their host. Like they drop off and they can swim and migrate and everything. And then the benefit that they serve to the salmon is, you know, they're spawning in these tributaries as well, and then they're breaking down all the detritus and things like that. So they're the filters and the cleaners in the tributaries, and so yeah, it's
And these are Pacific lamprey that we have. Those are sea lamprey in the Great Lakes.
Okay.
And you know, that's like you said, that's an invasive in the Great Lakes. These are native fish. And so
Where's
it's
the sea
all
lamprey originally from?
East Coast.
East
and
Coast.
and
Yeah, because
and Europe.
what happened was sea lampreys couldn't get past Niagara Falls. And so then when they got moved, eventually, like that was a natural barrier. And so the upper systems never had them. And then eventually on ship ballast or whatever, lampreys got moved above a natural barrier and then poof, and just decimated lake trout. You know, and they started all those different programs of poisoning spawning beds, and it still goes on.
Do
In
people
fact,
ever
another
eat-
like you're talking about, like another Doge cut was there was a big
Defunded it,
there was a
yeah.
big Doge cut around, like all this work to try to get lampreys under control in the Great Lakes system, and then they were axing the people that run the program. And that was when that was going on. I pointed out, like on the show, I pointed out that there's a little bit of a, like you said, like paying attention to what the ramifications are. We've spent millions and millions and millions of dollars getting them under control, and then you go to save a couple bucks by ditching some dudes that, you know, and then all of a sudden the whole investment goes out the window, you know, because you're trying to save a couple dollars, right?
yeah.
But that's different watershed, different problems.
Do people ever eat these Pacific lamprey?
Yeah. Actually, I meant to bring some today, but I didn't get to meet up with my friend that she had some that she had put away. That it was we dried them. You know, you eat them fresh, roast them, and they're really really rich. I'd say it's a acquired taste. I'll send some to you guys. You can taste it. Some dried lamprey, but yeah, it's really oily fish, and you know, like that was highly sought after,
Yeah.
right? You need those calories to.
They're in the
Yeah.
Scoffier's cookbook. One of the things that when I was doing Scavenger's Guide to Haute Cuisine, one of the things I bombed out on was getting lampreys, but that was in the Scoffier's cookbook. It's like French lamprey preparation.
Is it a bit like
like
mackerel
eel.
or eel? Right, it is.
It's an eel.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like
yeah.
if you
okay.
cut its head
Oh,
off, you
I
think you're
love
looking at
eel.
an
I'm
eel.
in that.
Yeah.
Sushi, yeah.
And they're crazy. Just the biology of them is pretty crazy. They're cartilaginous fish. They're an ancient fish, jawless. They're 400 million years old. I mean, and they were here that long ago. I mean, when the continents were all connected.
Yeah.
And they've been able to figure out how to survive until man put enough dams on the river that they went down to critically low numbers in the Columbia, probably down to 20,000 or so. We've had lamprey programs going for a while now at the tribes, and it is coming back. And we've got lamprey that we've got coming back to Idaho and other higher tributaries. They're a weak swimmer, so getting over dams is a difficult thing. There's been a lot of technology stuff to try and figure out
how to get them moving.
But it's getting
But
better.
you go up to like the Yukon, Kuskokwim, Kobuk River. That's like an indigenous subsistence fishery still with lampreys.
Yeah.
It was 50% at each main stem project that you'd lose of adult lamprey returning. So that's why it was the tribes that took the initiative to start the lamprey translocation. So collect at Bonneville Dam and then take them up to the tributaries, and that's how we're starting to see fish returning. So we want to do more of that, and also installing passage for lamprey, like a wetted wall, for them to work their way up, because they can't go up the fish ladders because there's, perpendicular surfaces.
jump.
So they're trying to swim up. They can't make it, but they could go all the way up that wetted wall. And so we're looking at adult passage at the dams, translocation. Another hard thing is a lot of the juveniles get sucked out into irrigation because, it's like a little worm in the slats on a screen. They would have to be outrageously small to keep the lamprey out.
So they wind up going through sprinkler systems.
End up in all the irrigation canals and whatnot. And we do salvages when they shut down the canal. We'll go in there and try to salvage as many of the juveniles.
Oh, really?
And they're super complicated. So the life history of them. And so everything you learned about salmon doesn't really apply. So it's trying to relearn all these things. They don't home. Like a salmon, if you get it in a particular area, they're going to come back to that spot to spawn. And lamprey don't. So it's...
Well, they don't have site fidelity. They just go wherever they go.
They're like American eels, like they're just distributed by currents.
Yeah, to a degree.
Yeah.
There is some that come back and they do have a pheromone that they give off. That if there's juveniles there, they'll come back to that location, but it wouldn't necessarily be where they were born. So it's complicated to try and restore them. And really it needs a broader coast-wide effort then. If you need to improve it in a lot of streams, not just, you can't just do a stream like you do a salmon and expect that homing is going to help you out and they'll come back. It isn't going to happen.
And they're anadromous, but not the word I was saying earlier.
They're not simiparous. They're heteroparous. Yeah, they can repeat spawn, although not that much. And we don't know so much of it. We just don't know about it because it hasn't been a sexy fish to study.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot going on with them now. And what's crazy, it's funny, but it's not. We were at the dam, right? Bonneville Dam, where they have the fish viewing windows. And that's where they count, right? Back in the 90s. So the Corps actually used to have an air blast system. Those damn lamprey getting in the way, they would air blast them off.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it'd look like a series of moss, or they'd be attached to the window and it would obstruct the view to count salmon. So they'd blast them off every 10 or 15 minutes and they'd push them down the ladder. So.
My brother Danny, who's a salmon biologist in Alaska, he works on that stable isotope issues and a bunch of other stuff. A lot of warm water issues and other things, but impacts warm water. One of his first paid fisheries gig was he was in Walla Walla, Washington, and he was paid to sit there looking out that window.
Counting fish.
This is one of his first paid gigs, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Living inside the dam, counting fish in the window and writing it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, I feel like we could go on all day, but
We didn't even hit success stories or more success stories.
who can conveniently give us some success stories?
Well, we can just read them off and
Read 'em off.
have them give us the short version.
Hit it.
Steelhead reconditioning.
Yeah, so that's a thing I've been working on for 25 years, along with a really good group of people. But basically, so steelhead are idiroparous. They repeat spawn. They're rainbow trout. So they can spawn again. They'll go up to whatever river they're in, and then they spawn, and they try to go back downstream and go back to the ocean. And in a totally natural system, the number of repeat spawners that you have in your population will range anywhere from 5 to 6% up to maybe 30 or 40%. And it's
Okay.
kind of dependent on how close you are to the ocean. Closer to the ocean, the higher you get of these repeat spawners. Through the hydro system, they don't make it. I mean, it is definitely not set up for large fish to pass downstream.
Got
And
it.
a lot of them will go through the bypasses, the juvenile bypass system, and there they get screened off. And we collect those fish, collect them at Lower Granite, other places. We take those fish then into a hatchery, put them in tanks. We've got specialized fish culture, fish care, and we'll feed them to where they survive, and then they'll remature. And this has been concentrated on wild fish. So this is a fish that successfully spawned. There were no eggs in it when we collected them at
Got
the
it.
dam. They go up. We've reconditioned them, release them either that fall, or some of them will skip and they won't spawn again till the following fall. We'll hold them for 18 months, keep feeding them. We let them go downstream of where we had collected them, and then they go back upstream and spawn in the
And they
river.
skip their whole return to the ocean.
Right. So
You
we've,
replicate- you
we've
replicate it.
circumvented that. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you've
Or-
cut out whatever mortality happens out on the open ocean.
Exactly.
Our communications director, he made a little pamphlet, and it shows like the steelhead spa where he's kicked back.
No kidding, really.
Yeah. And
You
so,
just say like, "We'll take care of everything, brother,"
yeah.
and then when you're ready to go again, we'll let you go.
And they home back to the same
Yeah.
stream. And we have
Well, how many
these-
fish can you actually do that with?
Well, it's a safety net thing, right? I mean, you got these low numbers of fish in certain populations, and you can target it to those streams by having a weir or some way of collecting to that stream, and especially in a place where you're really worried about them blinking out.
Oh.
Or you get bigger collections, more generalized, like Lower Granite has the whole Snake River. We release them though, and the fish.
How many fish?
100 maybe, or 150.
Oh, so use
We've
small
been
numbers,
concentrating. We've been doing it at a research scale.
Yeah, no, I
This
understand. I understand.
This is now.
Yeah, I'm not trying to dog on it. I was just
it's
trying to get a
finally
sense of.
now we're gearing up to do this as a production scale. It's a
I
Nez
see.
Perce Tribe project at a production scale.
Oh, that's cool.
But there's fish that go back to the Imnaha, the Upper Salmon River, the Grand Ronde, the Clearwater, the Sea Sesh, everywhere.
This is, but it's great.
And it's
great.
wild fish.
And I know we're looking for positives. It's great, but it's like that is sort of like definite. You know the term conservation dependent. That is like the poster child of conservation dependence.
Right.
You know, I mean, we have the fish because we literally handle it and care for it. You know,
Yeah.
it's great, but I mean, you know, I don't want to be Debbie Downer. It's great, but it's like, holy shit, has it come to that? Do you know what I mean?
That's the problem, is that wild steelhead recovery, nothing's really worked.
Yeah.
You do supplementation. Some things that have worked, we've been able to pull off with salmon, hasn't worked for steelhead.
Yeah.
We get hatchery fish, but getting more wild
Yeah,
fish
all
is
this
hard.
conversation about how do you get these big ass fish out of the ocean to their spawning grounds. And with steelhead, it's like, okay, let's get these big ass fish out of the ocean, up to their spawning grounds, back to the ocean. Right?
Yep.
And you're like, oh, that's tricky.
Yep.
Right. They're not going back down.
Yep.
What
That-
about like Snake River, Fall, Chinook, and then sockeye and coho? We've got those on the list for your success stories.
Yeah. So in about the early 90s, Snake River Fall Chinook were under 100 fish at Lower Granite. And Nez Perce Tribe had a hatchery program for Fall Chinook. And that stock has rebounded to where the peak was about 90,000 fish in the Snake River. I think it's hovering now around anywhere from 30 to 50,000.
With some natural reproduction.
Yeah. So you get some natural. So the idea there is to collect the fish and then outplant those juveniles so that they'll return to the.
So there you're
To the
helping
river.
them. You're helping them get back to the ocean.
Yeah, kind of that hatchery. It's integrated hatchery program. So you're taking in wild fish as well as the hatchery fish, trying to maintain the genetic,
Yep.
your genetic integrity and stuff.
And those are getting back home on their own fins. I mean, they're going
Yeah.
back up to
Yeah.
they'll later make it up on their
Yeah,
own.
there's fisheries now. There wasn't a fall Chinook. When I was in college, there wasn't fall Chinook fisheries in the Snake River. There
How
are
big is the fall Chinook there on that river?
25 pounds,
I'll
20
take
to
it.
30. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's fisheries all the way down as well as off the coast.
Oh yeah,
Off the
dudes. Yeah,
DC.
dudes are catching those fish
Yeah,
all
they're-
along the
they're
whole
catching
system.
them everywhere.
Yeah.
What about sockeye and coho? It says you had some reintroductions.
Yeah, and that was a tribally led effort. Like how I had mentioned, a lot of the hatchery production being in the lower river, which was a natural. You're just feeding your sport and commercial harvest and totally excluding the tribes and everybody inland. So it was we started the coho reintroductions back in the 90s and taking juveniles from the lower river and taking them back into their tributaries, like in the Methow and the Wenatchee, the Yakima, and that was highly successful. And so that was replicated by the Nez Perce tribe, and it was actually the state of Idaho has a law against reintroduction programs, and it was by night. That actually, it's our tribal chairman now, Gerald Lewis. He worked in fisheries for a number of years, and it was back when he was in fisheries. He drove the truck in the middle of the night of taking those coho up to the Nez Perce tribe so that they could reintroduce them.
Because it was becoming illegal.
It was illegally, yeah. So under threat of arrest by the
Even on
state.
tribal land?
And
Because what are they? Because they don't want to then create like new ESA issues for themselves.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
more responsibilities for maintaining and all that type of thing. So
I don't know where these
Like,
Yeah.
like the
came
level,
from,
of,
but they're
like the
here
level
now.
of cynicism, dude, is just unbelievable.
yeah, so
The
yeah,
like don't put some there, because then we'll be obligated to like do something to allow them to live.
mhm. So that the coho reintroductions were highly successful. We started out bringing in juveniles and we'd hold them in acclimation ponds for a month or so and then release them from there. And then as they started returning, then we started building things out into a full supplementation program where we're getting our own brood to spawn and all these generations, and then we're still incorporating some of the lower river like as needed, but yeah, it's almost becoming a self-sufficient program. But also you have the anti-hatchery group, but we're leading on the genetic side where we're incorporating, trying to have that genetic diversity, and we use stocks that were like similar to this area and distance and things like that. But we're just being mindful of the work that we do. So there wouldn't be coho above Bonneville Dam if it wasn't for the efforts of the tribes. And I always credit our senior most biologist Tom Scribner with Yakima, and he hates that I call him out all the time, but that was his life's work. He did years and years of advocacy, and then also fighting with our state co-managers because they were against it, because there was worries because coho are more voracious eaters, and they were worried about them eating the spring chinook. It's like these things coexisted for millions of years. It's like we just need to get them back, and they'll work out their areas and where they live. And like it took us to mess them up. Let's help them
Yeah.
recover. And the same thing with the sockeye reintroduction. We're working with the Okanagan Nation Alliance in Canada, collecting fish at Wanapum Dam, which is just upstream of the Snake River, because the Snake River sockeye are listed. So that's what that has all the ESA restrictions and concerns. So we're collecting above the Snake, and then so did reintroduction programs into the Yakima, into Lake Cleellum. And we just completed a passage project at Lake Cleellum because that was used as an irrigation reservoir. It was checked up, and so there was no passage, and that's how the sockeye were extirpated in the tributaries, was from irrigation,
Got
the
it.
Bureau reclamation. These dams, these diversions without passage, no fish screens, and dewatering events and things like that. So, the tribes have really been working together with BOR and the local irrigation districts to be able to get fish like how can we work together? The Yakima Basin Integrated Plan is a great success story of that. They got this like $30 million fish passage structure at Lake Cle Elum for juveniles to outmigrate. They'll still have to truck the adults over the dam, but they could go up into the tributaries and spawn, rear in the lake, and have access to get out. So that's been a huge success story. And we've been working with the Nez Perce tribe. They want to do reintroductions into Lake Wallowa for sockeye as well.
Wow,
So,
man.
yeah, but that's really complicated because, like with the ESA listings and what poor shape the Snake River sockeye are in. So they're collecting at Bonneville Dam, and they actually utilize our genetic technology. They collect at Bonneville Dam, and then they screen out, and they could see.
You're kidding me. You can screen out the ESA ones from the non?
Yeah. GSI,
So like you,
right?
we can move. You, buddy, you got to stay put.
Mhm.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow,
And
man.
I think that's one of the big success stories too, is collaboration. I mean, through the Six Sovereigns stuff that Donella was talking about with states of Oregon, Washington, the treaty tribes, we work great with, and at Bonneville Dam, that's an integrated crew that we have with the Sea Lion Project. It's got people from state of Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and CRITFC that we have all working together. It's under the same permit, and it's all jointly done. So from the dark times that you talked about earlier, it's we're not all the way there, but it's better. It's a lot better than when I started. It's improving, and it gives you hope that I think it can get better.
Yeah, that man. One of the things I appreciate about the conversation is I've always looked at the whole issue being I always looked at it like binary. It'd be that the dams stay and the fish go, or the dams go and the fish stay. And it's encouraging to think that there could be, I mean, as much as it is becomes very conservation dependent, very expensive, but you could see some level of progress, and at least hang on and wait for a better day, just to have something to save. Right. I know I've mentioned a couple times already, but my brother who's the fisheries guy in Alaska, he had this really interesting perspective about Alaska versus the lower 48. He said that conservation in the lower 48 it's all recovery. Do you know what I mean? We're in recovery mode. Up there, they're still in almost like a classification mode. They're still trying to go what's here? Right? What is here? Trying to count things, describe things, get a sense of what's there. And down here, it's we just look at what's gone. You know what I mean? How do we try to fix our mistakes?
So hard because salmon are international issue, right? Even the harvest of salmon, because that's why we have the Pacific Salmon Commission, Pacific Salmon Treaty, and looking, when things really tanked back in the 80s and the numbers were in dire straits in the Columbia Basin. And that's when, those court cases were happening and our tribal fisheries programs were really being established and the tribes started their supplementation efforts. That's when you could see the rebound in the curve on the graph of when our tribes started doing that. That work to get us here.
We haven't even gotten into all that stuff with high seas drift nets and dudes out in almost in international waters peeling off American salmon, man. We didn't even get into that stuff. But
and the bycatch of salmon in other fisheries is huge.
Yeah, and then they go digging into cans of salmon and it's full of canned steelhead that they're catching out on the high seas, It's just unbelievable, man.
The odd years with the high pink numbers, that's being seen. We're seeing decreased signal in chinook and other lower 48 fish. And, those are Alaska as well as Japan and some of those Asian countries that are putting out a lot of pinks. So it's complicated.
No one's sorting through those nets, man.
Nope.
and that's all there. It's done just for corporate interest, right? That's not anything natural. It's not a natural population. It's not a public service. It's these groups putting out all this pink hatchery production just for this commercial fishery, low value commercial fishery in comparison to what they could be having in sockeye.
I sent Yanni the other day. Do you have that text message?
Mm-hmm.
pull up that text message. I sent Janis some fish price stuff. We'll almost close out with this.
And we can't forget about where to go if you want to donate.
But we were talking about just relative value here when you're talking about like pink, like the pink industry. Do you have that?
Mm-hmm.
Nickel.
This is paid at the dock. Yeah.
Steve and I exchanged at times a lot of text, so it's taking just a second.
I think it was 6
here.
cents.
6, yeah.
And then compared to like a sockeye or a king, hopefully Yanni can find it.
There's been years that when I grew up fishing, we were getting 2.5 cents a pound for Putelis on the Columbia. It's a different stock of fish like that runs in the lower river. You have upriver brights that were farther upstream.
Thule, like THULE.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but 2.5 cents a pound.
Mm-hmm.
On those.
Yeah, these were overall average prices paid to fishermen in 2025. This is the Alaska Fish and Game Department. Chinook took $6.40 a pound. Next down,
this is paid to fishermen at the dock,
Yeah.
$6.40 a pound.
Next down the line was coho at $141, sockeye at $117. Surprisingly to me, chums were 80 cents, and then the pinks came in at 30.
Oh, 30 cents. Okay. But like
still.
just a relative picture of the way that the values on these fish are perceived, and then like the amount of the other thing about this is such a rich subject. You go on and on, but like the pink hatchery stuff is you think when you're running cattle. When you're running cattle and you want to graze cattle on public land, you pay a grazing fee. You have a contract and pay a grazing fee. A cannery runs a pink hatch. They're grazing for free.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff goes out in the open ocean and grazes for free. And then it comes back and you sell it for 30 cents. You know what I mean? You sell it for 30 cents a pound, dude. It's competing with wild fish.
Mm-hmm.
And then compared to the market, I was looking at just Pike Place fish prices as of yesterday. And of course, it's probably going to be more expensive, but 30 to 40 pounds for wild
Dollars.
Chinook.
30 to 40 bucks for a pound of wild Chinook.
Yep. And then that was an average. Then Pike Place was 55 for fillets. Sockeye is about $50 a pound for fillets, and coho is 28.
Are pinks on there?
Nope. White sturgeon was like average 10 to 30, depending upon.
You know who else we didn't get to? We didn't get to bitching about killer whales. Who I guess can go into a school of pinks. If there's a king in there, they go into that school. It could be thousands of pinks, and they're going to grab the king.
Yeah.
Dude, they know.
They know the price.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
That they'll sort through and find kings. Because that's the good one. That's the fatty one right there.
Well, that's like with sea lions, right? Doug was talking about the stellars that eat sturgeon. They were primarily going after the big females and eating out the bellies.
They wanted to row.
Yeah.
Yeah. Animals.
Well, it gives me hope. Like your aha moment story of seeing those giant fish in that pool. I feel like the stuff you guys are doing, if at the minimum you're giving the opportunity for future generations to have that moment. Hopefully we can keep the whole thing going. And then to think that we could have like what Alaska has, like literally right here or within a half a day's drive of where we're sitting right now, and that we don't, and that we're not putting more effort into doing it.
Could have walked across the river on them.
It's kind of crazy.
It's the resistance to change and moving beyond the status quo of that's the way we've always done things. Like you have this old car that's all beat up and I'm barely keeping it running, but I refuse to trade it in.
Well, it's the baseline syndrome too, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of us here in this room would ever have seen or would know what it was like to have those kind of fisheries right here.
Yeah, like my little kids, like if we don't turn things around on salmon, my little kids would be like, man, 2025 was bitching, dude. We got 3 kings.
Yeah.
You'd never see that now.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of
That
misconceptions.
was the good old days, dude.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of misconception too. People don't understand that. Like, "Oh, what are they complaining about?" Like they see those reels and those videos of all those fish coming back to those pink hatcheries,
Mhm.
and that's what they're showing. That's not what's going on in reality, and having fish coming back to the rivers and the spawning grounds and things like that. That's more natural, but they see these outrageous things and think that's not a big deal. And there's also a lot of misconception, and we call it the numbers game, right? They're looking at the total number of salmon that passed Bonneville Dam. That's kind of what the outsiders view as success of the
Yep.
health of the river. Like, we're around 2 million now, but a lot of that is still lower river hatcheries. You have little white salmon and spring chinook hatcheries where they're not, whereas wild chinook, wild spring chinook in the upper and mid Columbia, you're only getting like 1,000
Yeah, I got you.
of that.
Yeah.
So
You can kind of
yeah.
cook the numbers. You make them. You can show what you want to show with the numbers.
And then also understanding that harvest is limited by those weaker stocks because you have ESA restrictions on spring chinook all throughout the basin. So you have very little access to harvest spring chinook. And, the numbers are so low. Well, sea lions are eating most of them before they get to us. And then we fight over the, 17% harvest that's shared between the states and the tribes.
Mm-hmm.
And then also in the summer, because of the ESA listed sockeye concerns, and we can't fish those on the successful Okanagan fish or Upper Columbia fish because of ESA restrictions. And the same thing happens in our fall fisheries. We have mesh restriction sizes because of B-run steelhead limitations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like things are great, but like, no, it's not. You have to look at the real picture of what's going on throughout the basin.
Yeah. Well, I said, man, we go on all day, but this has been great talking to you guys about it. I've learned a ton.
And I'm just one person. We have a ton of great experts on any
Sure.
subject you want to touch on. And it would be really awesome to, focus more on the CBRI, the Columbia Basin Restoration Initiative. And, that's what we're continuing to work towards and advocate for to get these actions done to continue the success. And also, looking for partnerships of, how we could work together because the only time we make actionable change is when we set aside our differences to focus on our commonalities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we connect. And also connecting as people, like how I said about, salmon, it's the heart of our culture. It's cultural, it's spiritual, and even things don't have to be religious to be spiritual. It could be that way for you or anybody else. Like I talked to a lot of our staff. I shared my aha moment of that, seeing that fish 800 miles away. And they've talked about sitting alongside the stream bank and seeing that fish jumping to get over this barrier or things like that. Like we can all feel that connection if we get out there, and you can't put a value on that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Take a first step, audience members. If you want to donate, can you guys plug your website? I know there's a donate tab there. Yep.
yeah, on our webpage, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. It's at www.CRITFC.org.
So CRITFC.org.
Yeah.
Yeah. All you non-Indian fellers out here, these are the fish. Same old fish. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.